call the meeting of the Waco City Council on June 15th, 2021 to order at Councilmember Andrea Barefield, who will be joining us in a little bit remotely today. Please now join me for a moment of silence. Thank you. As part of the next phase of the City of Waco reopening process, today's City Council meeting is open to the public attending in person. We are following CDC guidance and taking appropriate safety precautions. The public may participate in today's City Council meeting either remotely or in person. In response to the COVID-19 pandemic, on March 16, 2020, the governor suspended various provisions of the Open Meetings Act pursuant to his state of disaster authority. The change was effective March 16, 2020, until further notice or until the state of disaster declaration expires. This meeting is being broadcast live at WCCC.tv. To allow for as much public input as possible, those who wished to speak remotely or submit their written comments on a listed agenda item were asked to register with the City Secretary's office by 1:30 p.m. today. Individuals who register to speak on an agenda item must limit their comments to 3 minutes. On items other than public hearings, speakers will be allotted one 3-minute presentation regardless of the number of agenda items the speaker wishes to address. We will now recess the regular session and convene to work session with a report from our City Manager, Bradley Ford.
Thanks, Mayor and council members. Good afternoon. We have no changes to the agenda this afternoon, but something noteworthy has happened. We have, probably for the first time, a former mayor and former city manager in the audience. So thank you, Mayor Mike Morrison and former manager Dale Fisler for joining us today. We do have one organizational update and employee recognition. Wanted to introduce the public to Lisa Blackman. She's our new assistant city manager. She's actually sitting behind me, I believe. If you'll stand, Lisa. Lisa joined us just a couple of days ago, actually, on Monday. She currently provides oversight to Cameron Park Zoo, Convention Center, Parks and Rec, Texas Ranger Hall of Fame, and the Waco Regional Airport. We're really excited to have her here in Waco. Prior to being here, she worked most recently for the city of Manteca, California, as our assistant city manager and deputy director of emergency services, as well as worked on legislative affairs. So she also served in Napa, which I think will give her a really great start in helping us on our customer services initiative here at the city. So welcome, Lisa, if you don't mind. All right, on the agenda today we have 3 informal reports. The first is an update on code compliance. The third is an update on the Franklin Avenue conversion, and sandwiched in between is a report on the Census Complete Count Committee. I do want to provide some special recognition to City Secretary Hudson, who provided quite a bit of leadership on that Census Complete Count team, and of course the documents there as well. And former City Manager Fisler is in the audience to answer any questions or provide any jokes, I imagine. He's probably got those ready to go if you want to talk about Complete Count Committee. But any questions on the informal reports, Council?
This is Holmes. I've got just one by one. Yeah, first of all, I'll start with 368, the Census Complete Count. I also want to commend our City Secretary Hudson for the great job that you did in leading that. You had a great committee that put all this information together with a lot of challenges with COVID and just getting people together and getting it organized and a lot of delays. So I applaud your work there. Going back up to 367, the code compliance, I appreciate the report on this also. And this has been such an important initiative, I think, for me, and I got this council too, that we better understand and process the who, what, when, and where of the code enforcement issues. And not only that, but also the process time, the response time, the completion time, is it a notice, warning, violation, or whatever it is, for us to be able to, for council to be able to see that, maybe on a quarterly basis, on what are the trends that we're seeing more objectively and more summarily, so we can kind of be able to better react to our constituents' needs as far as code enforcement. So any movement towards a kind of a concise and meaningful report, I think is welcome. And what's the third one is the Franklin Avenue. Yeah, this one is, we're basically hitting pause on this, which I think is, if you read through the materials, I think you've done a great job of summarizing sort of where we are on five, pretty big issues as far as traffic flows, with it kind of being confused a little bit with I-35 and 4th and 5th, and what we're doing with Washington. So that part of it, some pedestrian issues we're talking about, some parking issues we're talking about, and the economics of it particularly, which I grasp firmly that we need to maybe hit pause on it. And then in the larger context, the bus rapid transit, which I don't want to lose traction on that, but again, I see the need for, hitting pause here and trying to figure out, where we're at. There's so many moving parts with this project, but I agree with staff's kind of conclusion to keep everything on track, but to see all these different parts kind of fit together for a more holistic solution. So all of the informal reports were great.
I want to jump in as well on the informal report about code enforcement. Code is something that I hear a lot about from my constituents, and looking at the report, I have 343 cases in my district in comparison to a low 53 over in
Those
District
53
5.
keep me away. The 53 are much.
You just
much
can't
more
compete with
severe.
D4. But I really appreciate seeing code develop under James's leadership, and excited to see just the process develop more. To echo what Councilmember Holmes said, I would love to see more proactive data, what our targets are, how proactive we are. From some of my neighborhood association meetings, there's been talk of wanting to see a more proactive response as opposed to so constituent-led. And like we discussed in agenda review, these numbers could probably have a 0 behind them and still be accurate. So excited to see this move forward, and excited to hopefully see a report in the future about which of these steps we're going to take to continue beefing out the code enforcement process.
Really quickly, Council, just for staff's sake, let's go informal report by informal report, if you guys don't mind, to
Okay.
give staff a chance to respond kind of in a more cohesive fashion. So any other comments on code enforcement?
Thank you so much for informal report 367. I am appreciative of the update that we get from code compliance. For those that know me, my fellow council members and staff know that code compliance is very near and dear to my heart, and how we address it. I appreciate how we are, especially, I focus a lot on our city-owned lots and making sure that if we're going to be asking our neighbors and our constituents to handle their lawns, that we are also taking care of ours. And so I was grateful to see in the informal report that the lots are going to be analyzed to see if maybe they need to go on a shorter schedule, and maybe some lots are okay every 6 weeks, but some lots will maybe need some TLC every 3 weeks. And so I think that's very smart and wise of city staff to put that in place. One of the questions that I do have, City Manager Ford, is, and if you don't have the answer, I completely understand, but as we begin to really ramp up our code enforcement efforts and making sure that we're hearing the concerns for our constituents, that we are fully staffed in handling and addressing those concerns. I think if we don't have the staff just yet, and we're asking people to give their input, but yet it still takes a long time for us to get or to really respond to that concern, that it might just defeat the purpose. So I just want to make sure that, and I'm sure you are, in your thinking, that you are proactively looking for ways to make sure that that the demand is met by the staff, I should say. That's all on the code compliance.
Thanks. I'll add to that. I'd echo what council members have said. I really appreciate what each of you have said and agree with it. I think that code is such an important tool in our toolkit, and a really critical tool that we can utilize to help revitalize downtown and build clean, prosperous, safe neighborhoods. I think it's one way we can do that, and I think the other tool that must accompany that is the resources that we have in place to help people who need help rehabbing their homes and getting their homes up to code. So I love that we've kind of developed this opportunity where we're going to hold people accountable to make sure that they're being good neighbors to their neighbors. But at the same time, if there's an inability to get their property up to compliance, whether it's code or lit or otherwise, there's someone in the private sector or a program within our own city to ensure that we are moving neighborhoods forward in a positive way, in a way that improves the quality of life in those neighborhoods and also improves the tax base in those neighborhoods as well. So I think it's really important for us to continue to emphasize this, and I look forward to, again, seeing some of the outcomes that will come from this revitalized department.
Thanks for the comments, council members. We certainly hear the feedback on the reporting and the proactivity, and we'll start drafting up a good quality professional report on a either monthly or quarterly basis that can walk you through some of the numbers as well as our targets for completing these cases and if we're hitting the targets. So I appreciate that feedback, and certainly we'll be evaluating resource requirements. We're walking through the budget process now, and we'll be reporting out on that soon as well.
Bradley, as a quick clarification, with that new reporting that you're going to produce for us, could there be a column that says whether that was flagged by a city staff member or by a constituent?
Definitely. Yeah, I think the proactive, reactive conversation you mentioned is definitely needs to be incorporated.
Okay.
Yep. It can be an indicator of a resource issue
Sure.
as well. So it's a lot of what you're saying is certainly related. It's helpful.
Great.
Informal report 368, I do want to say thank you to Dale for leading our efforts. Let me tell you, I had the opportunity to be on this committee, and I have never attended a city meeting or board or commission meeting where I laughed so much. And so who knew that the census could be this much fun? And so Dale, thank you for leading our team. You did a phenomenal job in spite of the pandemic, in spite of fear that was going around with the census, in spite of national issues that were taking place at that time, you still drove us forward. So I really want to say thank you for your efforts and time on the census. I do also want to commend City Secretary Hudson, which was definitely the glue that kept us all together. I don't think that not even 3/4 of the work would have been completed without her help, and so I want to really acknowledge her and thank you for your efforts. I know that you were bombarded with 8 very strong personalities who had very different ideas, and somehow or some way you brought us all in together. And so thank you both for really just taking this project on, and I know that we'll have a presentation later on that ties directly and indirectly with the census right now, but I just really want to publicly say I appreciate your efforts.
Anyone else on that? Multiple strong personalities wanting to go different directions. It sounds like old times with Dale and Esmeralda. Group. I want to thank the people who've served on that committee by name. Tina Maya, Dale Fissler, our council member Andrea Beerfield, our own Hector Sabito, Liz Palacios, Angela Avilia Cuevas Peacock, Margie Cintranen. Am I saying that right? Okay. Thank you. I want to thank each of those individuals for serving on this committee. Our census, doing an accurate census, ensures that we not only have the right data that informs the decisions that this body might make and higher levels of government might make, but also ensures that we're represented well. So it's important, good work. So thank you, Esmeralda, Dale, Andrea, who isn't here with us right now, and Hector, and the others for their dedicated work to really ensuring that we got the best count that we could in the midst of unprecedented circumstances. So thank you guys very much. And Dale, it's great to see you. And I think we have one more informal report as well on the Franklin conversion. Any questions for staff or comments on that?
Yeah, I'll start it off again. Informal report 369. Although I am disappointed that we're putting this project on pause, I really have to commend staff for just saying, you know what, we have a lot of things still up in the air, so let's push pause for right now until these other projects are completed, and let's really take a long-term approach of how Franklin is going to be. And so I do want to say thank you, staff, for thinking that way. I would hate to get halfway through the project and waste all this money and then think, this is not the right way we should have done it. I really want to say thank you. I think you're absolutely right. With I-35 still hopefully scheduled to be complete at the end of next year. You have the work on 4th and 5th Street. You have Washington Avenue that's, we're moving forward with it. And so maybe this is a great opportunity to just push pause. I did have a question about the money that we've spent on the project so far. So I think I understand that we have spent somewhere in the ballpark of $320,000 on this project. Is that correct, City Manager Ford?
That's correct.
However, when we decide to pick up this project again, we don't have to start from ground zero. We can actually pick up we can start where we're leaving right now, correct?
That's correct. We anticipate much of that expenditure will be beneficial to us when we pick it back up.
Wonderful. And so, we just want to make it publicly that when we start this project again, that we are not starting from ground zero. The $320,000 didn't just go by the wayside, but it is actually something that can be utilized down the road. So thank you for that clarification, sir.
I wanted to say on this, I appreciate staff's fiscal prudence here in making sure we don't jump into this without having everything lined up. I also appreciate looking at the way this will affect traffic outside of the two-way conversion. My neighbors in the Austin Avenue Neighborhood Association are always concerned about traffic on Austin Avenue, and I know from personal anecdotal experience that I see a lot of colleagues of mine that I used to work together in the Roosevelt Building at 4th and Austin who, by the time they get to Castle Heights and 32nd and Austin, are still on Austin Avenue, having come out of downtown that way. And a lot of folks use it as a bypass going in, as city staff is well aware. So in terms of Washington already being underway for a two-way conversion, and now Franklin going in that direction as well, I want to make sure to see the way that plays out before we jump into it. So I appreciate staff's consideration of those factors.
My goal has always been to make sure that we were thoughtful in how we engaged in capital improvements in our street program to build up our economy. And I think that goal is still being achieved by what we're doing here because we want to make sure that we do it right. So like Councilmember Sabito, I hate that we're pushing pause on this because I think I'm really ready to see some beautification efforts. I'm really ready to see some pedestrian-friendly efforts achieved through this. I'm really ready to ensure that our traffic patterns are moving at a rate that allows our downtown economy to be more successful. But after much discussion from the staff and reading the informal report that's available online to the public who ask questions themselves, I think it is wise and prudent for us to make sure that we do this at the right time. I would just say it's something that if for some reason something happens and we get to a place where we can move on it sooner than when we're anticipating moving on it right now, if our staff gets to a position where they're like, you know what, I think that based on the data that we got, we have the data we need, we're ready to go, let's do it. I think that's going to be important. I'm resisting getting Dale Fissler to come up here and give us an update on this one because we were working on this one. He was here. So are you prepared to give an update on this one, Dale? I'm just kidding. So I think there's this eagerness to move forward on this, but I also really appreciate our staff's thoughtfulness to make sure that when we do something, we do it right and we do it well. So look forward to continuing to have a conversation about moving forward with this project in the days ahead. Any other comments on our informal reports? All right, Bradley, back to you.
Thank you. We've got 6 public hearings on the agenda today. Public hearing 377, of course, is a tax increment financing district item, and Kent George will be joining our meeting later on in the business section to cover that item. And similarly, public hearing 378 is a public hearing to receive input on our draft 2021-2022 annual action plan, which will be covered later on by Rainisha Hudnall, our interim director of community services. She'll cover that later in the business session as well. The remaining 4 public hearings, Clint Peters, our director of development services, will cover here in a few minutes in the work session. On resolutions today, we have 21, and I'm just going to highlight 3 briefly. The first one is resolution 393, which requests authorization to apply for a federal grant from the COPS office to hire up to 12 new police officers. You'll recall Chief Victorian mentioned this grant towards the end of her presentation at our June 1st council meeting. This authorization, if we end up getting the grant from the COPS office, would result in a future budget increase due to the match requirement and the personnel involved in the program. The 12 additional police officers would have about a $1.2 million budget impact annually, and they'd be used to expand the concept of relational policing in the department, particularly focusing on the patrol division's evening shift, which is where we have more workload than resource. On Resolution 2021.
Brad, this sounds
sure.
weird. I just wanted to comment on this one. I like the economic perspective of it, where we're getting, I think we kind of see that we need these additional officers in the bigger picture anyway. And so I think taking advantage of this grant, I think makes all kinds of sense as far as getting the 12 and getting the federal grant to pay for half of it over the course of 3 years. I think in 4 years' time, we will be kind of growing our police force into a number that we're all, at least I'm more comfortable with. Because I think we see a need right now for more patrol, more enforcement, more presence, and I am supportive of this grant. And also in the context of the relational policing that we're talking about, mental health issues that we're talking about, and transitioning into that part of policing, as well as just any of the new policing, state-of-the-art policing techniques. I think having this additional force on makes a lot of sense for the city.
All right. Our second resolution to highlight is Resolution 399 on Blue Duck scooters, who's requesting the ability to exercise their one-year extension option to continue providing e-scooters in greater downtown Waco. We're really highlighting this because the council went through a really thoughtful conversation a couple of years ago, very intentional about the setting up of the program, and that really allowed us to avoid some of the rollout issues that we saw in other cities. Additionally, wanted to highlight the response from Wacoans and visitors has been very positive with Blue Duck, and almost 50,000 folks have taken rides since July of 2020 through April of 2021. As part of their one-year extension, they're requesting and staff's recommending Blue Duck would see and would bring additional scooters. They'd go from a fleet size of 150 to 250 as part of this request. And
With that, would the geographic area that they're set in increase, or would it stay the same?
We're not currently contemplating a geographic change. I do think as we get 6 months or so into the program year, there'll be a few different things we come back to the council to engage on changes with, including potentially geography, but also there's other types of vehicles that people are getting on these days in other communities, and I suspect Blue Duck and other vendors may want to request other types of vehicles, e-bikes and things of that nature.
Great.
So I think that's coming, in the next few months.
Great.
One of the things that I appreciate Blue Duck will be incorporating this coming, if their contract is renewed, the concept of price equity, and how I think that has been important to council even since we've had the discussions of having these type of scooters, whether Blue Duck or another company. And so I'm very glad to see that they are addressing that concern of city council in this coming year. And so I think it's going to be very positive for, from an equitable standpoint of view as they offer their pricing to our citizens.
The final resolution I wanted to highlight is Resolution 402, which is a storm sewer ratification. We had a recent storm sewer collapse at the corner of Columbus and 12th Street. Staff was alerted to that collapse due to a sinkhole occurrence. Unfortunately, that resulting collapse resulted in reconstruction of about 450 linear feet of storm sewer at a cost of about $420,000. Not cheap. This is an unfunded expenditure that will be covered by the current year's streets budget. And on ordinances, we have one on the agenda today. It's a second reading. If there's no further questions, that completes my report.
Ms. Holmes, again, I had one quick comment on Resolution 401, Oak Road improvements, that's out in D5. I felt a big need out there because there's a lot of traffic that carries, and it's had some very dangerous parts of the road on a couple of curves out there. So I appreciate the prioritization of this one. It definitely filled the need. We're finishing it several months ahead of schedule, which is a great thing. Pretty much right on budget, a little bit of overage here, but by and large, a great project. And I think the important thing in our Better Streets program, this had a pavement condition index, a PCI of 39 before we started, and it's obviously now up to 100. So I think that's emblematic of what we're trying to do in the city as far as streets and roads. I appreciate the work there.
Council, if I may also add that for Councilmember Border and Palmer have filed affidavit of substantial interest for public hearing 377, work session 372, resolution 2021-385, as well as resolution 384. Resolution 385 and 384 will have to be pulled from consent agenda and voted on separately.
Very good. Are there any other items the council would like to remove from the consent agenda?
Yes, I would like to remove 2021-393 from the consent agenda.
Good. Any other removals? Consent agenda includes resolutions 2021-383 through 2021-403 with the exceptions of resolution 2021-385 and 393. City Manager Ford, would you please introduce the first work session?
Sure. Our first one is our work session 2021-370. We'll be joined by Clint Peters here to go over the planning public hearing items. Clint?
And council members, because we do have a lot on the agenda today, we've tried to budget time wisely. And so this work session is slated for about 20 minutes. So no one falls into a pit if we go over. There's not a buzzer, fire, or anything, but that's what we've slated for.
You've got 2 minutes and we've got 18.
Yeah. Clint's performance review is right now.
That was really good.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. We do just have the four public hearings for planning items. The first one, our first two are short-term rentals. The first one at 1123 McGanzer Way. This is a request for STR Type 2, which is a non-owner occupied home rented out to one group at a time. This home is in the Lakes University Parks addition down off of University Parks near Route 340. The owner of the home does live in the home, but is out of the home most of the year at work. He's actually in the minor league system of a professional baseball team. So he is out of Waco a lot, so I would like to rent the house out for a short-term rental while he's away from Waco. It is a 4-bedroom home that's proposed to be a designated operator that lives in Waco. This one's a little bit unique because it was built with a shorter setback than what we normally see with single-family homes, which is 25 feet. This one was built back with a 16-foot setback. And so the driveway does not meet our standard parking depth and size for a parking space. It does have a 2-car garage, which met the requirement for parking for a single-family home, but for a short-term rental, the parking requirement is 1 space for every bedroom. And this is a 4-bedroom home, and so the 2 spaces in the garage and then the 2 spaces in the garage do meet our requirements, but the 2 spaces in the driveway do not meet the size requirements for a parking space. And there's really not any other opportunity on the site to add additional parking spaces that you normally see in other STRs where we just put a condition on the permit that they meet the parking requirement before they get their license. And so based on that, staff did recommend disapproval of this because it did not meet the parking requirements for the STR license. And at the Plan Commission hearing, the applicant did request to amend their STR permit request for just renting out 2 bedrooms instead of 4, which would reduce the number of parking spaces required down to the 2 that's there in the garage. So Plan Commission did recommend approval by vote of 7-2 to approve the short-term rental permit, but just for 2 bedrooms. And so they'll have to advertise that on their listings, and staff will keep up with that, make sure that it's been done according to recommendation of Plan Commission and if approved by City Council.
Hey, Clint, is staff okay with the revised ask from the applicant that they'll only rent it out to 2 parties at a time, since they only can fit 2 parking spaces?
Yeah, I mean, it does make it a little bit more difficult because we will have to keep up with that on the enforcement side of it, but it is something that we can monitor and make sure it's done through their listings. You know, they'll just have to make sure that their listings on whatever platform they're on, VRBO or Airbnb, that it's specifically listed for just 2 bedrooms.
Okay, thank you.
Here's a picture of the home, and you can see the garage there and then the parking space. And you can see up and down the street, some of these houses have larger driveways that can accommodate the spaces, but you can see up and down, especially on this picture, where you have the shorter driveways where the cars overhang the public right-of-way. And we talked about the recommendation on that one. We did get 1 card out of 28 notices that was opposed to the request.
Clint, can you verify whether or not with this comment card it said that the owners were currently renting this out? Are they renting it out as a long-term rental, as a short-term rental? Is that, are either of those factual?
Sure. To our knowledge, they have not been renting it out. We did check the listings. It has not been listed on any of the platforms. They do own another house down the block that his parents live in. But to our knowledge, there has not been any rentals on this one. There was another STR permit down at 1208 McGanzer that was a completely separate owner that stopped operation in 2020. But from our knowledge, there hadn't been any other STRs advertised on that street.
Clint, I have a quick question for you. So staff had recommended disapproval on this, but then Plan Commission made an adjustment to the 2 rooms and is recommending or voted for it. Would you say that staff still recommends disapproval, or do you recommend approval given the change that the Plan Commission made?
Well, I think the staff's been pretty consistent with these as we've applied the STR ordinance on our recommendation, and then, you know, let the variables and the, the facts that come out in the hearings, play through with the Plan Commission and City Council. I do think that's an appropriate compromise that can be done and can be operated that way and meet the ordinance, and we can make sure that it's enforced that way.
Thanks.
The next one, Public Hearing 380, and this is another STR 2 request in R1B zoning at 2525 Colcord Avenue. This is at the corner of Colcord and 26 in the Sanger Heights Neighborhood Association in Council District 4. The owner lives in McLennan County outside of the city limits and will manage the property. They also own another STR that's outside the city limits, but this will be their first one inside the city limits of Waco. Here you can see it's R1B zoning. This is the map of all the other licensed STRs. You can see there's quite a few around it, but none are within the 500 feet buffer requirement that we have. They do have an existing carport with parking on 26th Street, but they do plan to add additional parking on Colcord to meet the requirement. This is a 2-bedroom home, so they just need 2 parking spaces. Here it is. It's currently being renovated. It's not completely done yet, so they'll have to have that parking put in before they can get their license. No opposition on this one out of 24 notices. The next public hearing is a rezoning from O3 to R1B at 500 North 34th Street, which is a single-family house at the corner of Waco Drive and 34th Street in the Brook Oaks neighborhood, again in District 4. This property was actually replatted, and part of it was rezoned to O3 from R1B back in 2014 by the same owners. They had plans to convert the house into a light commercial use, but it decided just to keep it as their residence, so they'd like to rezone it back to single-family zoning. We had 33 notices on this one, had 1 returned in favor, and the Plan Commission recommended approval of the zoning. And then the last public hearing is an abandonment request for a portion of a remainder of a 20-foot alley between Mary Avenue and Jackson and South 6th Street and South 8th Street. This is kind of a unique situation. 7th Street that used to come through here between Jackson and Mary was abandoned back in the 70s. And then the recent redevelopment plans of the Olmsted Kirk building and then the Texas Metering Device buildings, they both abandoned their portions of the alley between 8 and 6 in the last previous years. But it left this little gap here that hadn't been abandoned. It's 20 feet wide by 32 feet. And so it was just recently caught by the surveyors that are working on the surveys for and development plans for AC Marriott. And so they're bringing this through to abandon that last little piece of the alley right through there. And staff does recommend it. There are some utilities in that alley, so they will need to either relocate them or provide easements. And that's it, and I think we'll give some time back to y'all.
There you go. Any more questions for Clint or staff? Thank you, Clint.
All right. Next up, we've got work session 2021-371, discussion of the redistricting process, potentially resulting from 2020 census. I'd like to invite former Mayor Dr. Mike Morrison for his interim update. And if you don't know, Dr. Morrison is really a recognized leader in this work around Texas with redistricting, and we actually have him under contract currently to provide those services here at the City of Waco. So, Dr. Morrison?
Thank you very much. Well, good afternoon. It's kind of a historic day today. I'm glad I got to be here. This is the longest I've seen Dale Fissler in a room without hearing from him.
That's good.
Someone will just have to pass that along today. Well,
Sure, it gets to him.
4 of you, or 3 of you, and one, Andrea, whom I guess is joining us, have seen this Dog and Pony Show before. What I thought I would do is let you lead the discussion. I might start with a little bit of an update on the comment, much delayed 2020 census. Despite all the good work done locally, circumstances really beyond the control of the nation with COVID have significantly impacted the release of the numbers we need. I think everybody's aware that we have the statewide numbers necessary to reapportion the congressional seats. What we don't have are numbers down to the block level, which are necessary to redistrict. And so while the state knows we have 38 congressional seats, they can't begin to draw those lines, nor can we begin to examine the council lines until we have the block count numbers. Traditionally, and in the 40 plus years I've been doing this, those numbers have been available to the state of Texas by mid-February. The reapportionment numbers that were released April 30th by statute were due to the president on December 31st. So they were 4 months late. Texas used to get the numbers along with the other Super Tuesday states in mid-February as they would do a rollout that the states with the earliest primaries would get the numbers initially first. This time, however, the Bureau of the Census is going to release all the numbers at the same time, and the current guesstimate is September 30th. That is almost an 8-month delay in the process, which in and of itself is not that big a deal. It's nice that we no longer have a 60-day pre-clearance requirement at the Department of Justice. So we've cut 60 days off the end of the process. But the problem that's going to arise is with the election calendar, because we know the state's going to come back in special session, and as soon as it has the numbers necessary to draw the districts based upon the reapportionment. And when you look at Super Tuesday election calendar, we're well into 2020 with when the election must be called, when filing must take place. And I think it'll be a real race for the state to meet those if it doesn't get the numbers. States probably will get their numbers for state use mid-August is what the census is guessing, a little bit ahead of when we'll have ours. My best guess is that we're going to see in special session later this year, once we have a better sense of when those numbers will appear, the legislature coming back or a federal court coming back and making some changes to the election calendar. Don't know what impact it would have on the city's May election. It could be what happened last November. You could end up with an election that is joined under the calendar with the primaries, in which case you got a lot more people involved. Just don't know. There's not a lot we can do about it now. The census has actually released the mapping geography. That's been released to the states. So the Ledge Council in Austin is probably already loading those into Red Apple and entering the existing lines under the new census geography. I should have those, that block and polygon, line and polygon data within the next couple of weeks. And what I can do to help speed up the process is working with planning, make sure that we have all the annexations accounted for, that we're on the correct side of the street. You know, if we're going down, it looks easy, but so often the side of the street you're on when you draw the line either makes your maps match up with what the Bureau of the Census and the Secretary of State has, or you get kicked back and saying there are issues here. The other thing we won't know until the legislature has done its job is while we probably won't see McLennan County or the city split congressional or state board of education, probably not by state senate lines, we already know that the city and the county are split by house lines, state house lines. That will probably happen again. And sometimes they're working off maps that slightly differ from ours. And so if we get too far ahead of them, we may need to come back and make some adjustments. That's really about all I can tell you about next steps. There's not really much that this council can do. As soon as I get the data that'll allow me to get the current lines into the 2020 mapping files, I'll get with Clint and others, and hopefully as soon as the numbers are released, it'll just be a matter of inputting the Public Law 94-171 census count into the new census maps. And so I would hope if we get the release on September 30th, it'll take a couple of weeks to get that into the software. But I would hope that by the end of October, we would have numbers that would let you know what each of your current districts looks like under the 2020 census. Now remember, they always take the census on April 1st, April Fool's Day. It's because we know it's not right when we get it. And if it was right when we got it, it wouldn't be right by the time we get to use it. And so they're just sort of in agreement that until somebody can show up with better numbers, we use that. And quite frankly, if we were to do something right now, we would do it with the 2010 census. So now I have some slideshow, and I'm happy to go through as much or as little of that, or simply to answer questions. Kelly, I know you haven't been through this before, and Josh, you haven't either. So, Mayor, how would you like to proceed?
Council, I mean, if we have slides, why don't we go through briefly and let's look at that.
Okay.
Yeah.
What I can do is just give you a synopsis of each slide and just stop me if I'm moving too fast. Let's see if I can do this. And if this were class, I'd talk about these a line at a time as we went through them, but it's not. And I don't, last viewed, previews right here. Can you get me back to the first slide, please? Maybe I'll let you move slides when I ask you. Basics. The council decides. My job's not to tell you how to redistrict. My job is to tell you how to redistrict as closely as you would like, consistent with state and federal law. This first slide is simply a synopsis of the legal authority that we have to satisfy. And well, I can go through this in a little more detail as we get through the slides. Let's go to the next slide, please. Or, yeah, that's next. Go ahead, go all the way down on that if you would. It wasn't until the case of Avery versus Midland County went to the U.S. Supreme Court that local governmental districts had to balance population among the districts. And that was when Hank Avery, who was the mayor of Midland, hired Lynn Olson, our Lynn Olson's dad, Lyndon Olson, to take this case up to the U.S. Supreme Court. And that's the classic example in Avery versus Midland County. The Commissioner's Court in all the counties in Texas, you have 4 commissioners and a county judge. Each commissioner is elected from a single-member district. County judge is elected at large. Midland County divided up the Commissioner's Court so that the city of Midland was entirely within one commissioner precinct. The remaining rural portions of the county were divided among the 3 other precincts, and then the county judge was elected countywide. The result was about 88% of the county lived in the city of Midland. So the city of Midland, with the vast majority of the population, got to elect 2 members of a 5-member body. And you all know how that works. Took to the U.S. Supreme Court. U.S. Supreme Court said, you know what? If you're electing a representative, not an executive officer, not a judicial officer, you have to balance population. And so the slide here simply says, whatever else we do, constitutional requirement is that we balance population. It doesn't have to be perfect, but we have to balance population within a tolerance that will show up on the next slide in a moment. The principles referred to as one person, one vote, that's completely accurate, except it has nothing to do with votes and it has nothing to do with voters. Everybody is entitled to representation. Now, you get into some exceptions with transients, adjudicated felons that you may hold in a county jail. But even the Baylor College students, if they were here on April 1st, as Dale and Esmeralda worked with their group, we tried our best to get them counted in McLennan County for all the reasons you know, from federal block grant funding down. Okay. Does anybody have a question on that? All right. Go ahead. This is Avery versus Midland County. And I'll tell you how close we have to get on the next slide, but if you want to take a look at that later, that's just what went up to the Supreme Court. And you can see 67,000, almost 68,000 in one district and under 1,000 in each of the other 3. And you can see why that sort of burned the mayor of Midland County. Okay, thank you. All right, go ahead and pull that if you would. Okay, the tolerances don't have to be perfect, and if you could get them, if they were required to be perfect and you could get it that way, somebody out of meanness would move the next day and you'd have to start over. They just have to be close enough to be fair. And we work with a 10% deviation. That's by statute in Texas, but from a constitutional standpoint, it's just a guideline. You can exceed 10% if you have a compelling justification. Within the state of Texas, though, you've got a legislative restriction that pretty much keeps you between that. So of the 5 council districts in Waco, we would divide whatever our 2020 population is by 5. That number is our ideal. We would then take the district with the highest population and the district with the lowest population. The difference between those is a maximum variance. We would convert that to a percent of the whole, which gives us a maximum deviation. If that differential between the highest and the lowest populated council districts exceeds 10%, by law in Texas, you have to redistrict. And for all practical purposes, absent some really compelling justification, you'd have to do the same because of the federal constitutional requirements. And a couple more slides will show you where we were last time. Now, the one thing about one person, one vote, the 2 things we have to balance are the Voting Rights Act, which really doesn't deal specifically with balancing population. It deals with dilution of minority access to the process or retrogression of what access existed before a change and what access exists after. This is the dog that wags the tail on one person, one vote. If to balance population, you end up necessarily reducing the minority profile in a district, you have to do that. One of the things that has happened in Central Texas over the last 30 years, quite frankly, is exactly what we wanted to happen, and that is our neighborhoods became less segregated. And as that happens, and as you need the same amount of people, you have a lower minority percentage. It may well end up that there will be a reduction in minority voting strength within a district. That is not necessarily retrogressive, at least not in a legally meaningful way. It's retrogressive in a legally meaningful way only if you could have avoided that and didn't, and had no legitimate governmental justification for it. Now, for example, Councilmember Palmer, your district sits between two that are probably going to have to shed people, and two that are probably going to have to pick up people. What that means, you're kind of like neutral Finland. Both sides shoot at you. It may well mean that even though your population, let's assume arguendo that your population is close to the ideal, you might still see some significant change as we move people in from one side and move them out of the other side. Won't know what that will do, but going back 40 years and looking at the city and the county, that's been the trend. And unless there's something that surprises us, we're going to anticipate that 3 and 5 will have grown, that yours will not have grown at that same rate, and that 1 and 2's growth will not have grown at that rate either. So that's an example of you can't just tug on one part of this. Any change you make is going to have some impact elsewhere. Thank you. This is it's a 2011 set of statistics from the 2010 census count. And what you can, I'll just focus on the far left. If you look at the far left column, the red numbers are the number of people that district was below the ideal, and the blue numbers are the number of people that district was above the ideal. And I don't know if you can see it, people out here probably can't, but at the very bottom shows the maximum variance, the maximum deviation, and how that compares to the ideal. And you can see that we were well beyond the 10% threshold. The maximum variance was almost 8,500 people, and as a deviation, it was almost 34% when we should be below 10. When it says Board of Estimates to the right of that in the blue, Board of Estimates versus Norris is a U.S. Supreme Court case where the court for the first time said that if you have a body like ours, where you have a member elected at large, that since everybody gets to vote for the mayor as well as their own council position, we compute that in, and that actually reduces the effect of that population variance. But you can see here it doesn't reduce it nearly enough to make a difference. But for example, suppose we showed that we had a maximum deviation of 11%, and then under Board of Estimates we calculated and found that we were 8.4. At that point, the council wouldn't have to redistrict. You might choose to for some other reason, but it wouldn't be necessary. Thank you. Now, go ahead if you would. All right. 14th Amendment, 5th Amendment were extended to the state specifically by the U.S. Supreme Court. That constitutional amendment Congress was given the power to enforce it. Really didn't do so meaningfully until 1965, the year after the Civil Rights Act was passed, amended in 75 and 82. Texas was not covered by the Voting Rights Act as originally passed because the triggering events were things like property ownership requirements, grandfather clause, literacy tests, and by 1965, Texas didn't use any of those to bar or to make it more difficult for people to vote. In 1975, we were brought within the mandatory preclearance provisions of Section 5. And we were brought under that because we had greater than a 5% single language minority, and we were using English-only ballots. And that was determined to be an impediment to voting. In 1982, this affected school districts more than it did cities, but up until 1982, to violate the Voting Rights Act, there had to be proof that there was an intent to discriminate. And in 82, the Supreme Court changed to an effects test. Says, you know, your motives may have been fine, but look at what you've done. And if what you've done makes it more difficult for protected voters to elect the candidates of their choice, the Supreme Court said that's a violation. Now again, we know the Supreme Court has said that Texas and the other states covered by the Voting Rights Act no longer have to get pre-clearance, which just means you don't have an objection. And you could have done that, and we did that every time. And Esmeralda remembers what it was like to put together that information. Either through a declaratory judgment of the District Court of Columbia or through an administrative ruling of the United States Attorney General Voting Rights Division, section of the Civil Rights Division. You will hear people say that the Supreme Court said that Section 5 is now toothless, and that's not really the case. Retrogression is still a violation of the Voting Rights Act. It's just if someone wants to challenge it, they're going to go to federal court. You don't have to prove to either the District Court of Columbia or the Justice Department that your plan is not retrogressive or dilutive, and we'll talk about it in just a moment. Thank you. Retrogression, which is the second part of this slide, is the easiest to explain. And that is you take the new census numbers, you apply them to the old lines, like that first slide we saw that had the spreadsheet, and you look at the voting percentages. And then you look at whatever's being proposed and decide if it's retrogressive. Have you made it more difficult when you didn't have to? And without, you can read as well as I can. Lightfoot, Go Million versus Lightfoot is the, you know, sort of the classic case of retrogression, where you had clearly an intent to make it more difficult. And there, as you can see, the approach was going from a 4-sided to a 28-sided figure that eliminated 400 black voters, saving only 4 or 5. And it's hard to argue that that was serendipitous. So retrogression is very simple. Look at what could happen before, look at what can happen now, and did you make it more difficult? Dilution, instead of comparing the new plan to the old plan, dilution says, have you done something that has not fairly allowed protected minorities the opportunity to elect a candidate of their choice when you could have avoided it? And you don't compare that to what the plan was before. You compare that to a hypothetical better plan. If a better plan could have been drawn to have given minorities greater access to the political process, and you did not do so, even if you were unaware of that plan, someone shows up with it, shows it to you, says, I want you to make a change. If you don't do that, and could have, then you have to defend that by showing there was a legitimate governmental reason for not accepting that. Something other than, well, we just didn't like it. Okay, thank you. This is where we were in the plan that was adopted, and you can see that we went from a 34% maximum deviation down to under 4, and a board of estimates from 28 down to 3.14. You don't get a prize for going way, way low. You want to go low enough where it doesn't appear that you're going to push yourself out of tolerance next month. And if you'll notice one of the things, if you look at 1, it's a lower population, And we say if you have too few people, those people that in that district are overrepresented. Each gets a little bit more of a share of the voter, of the council member than the other. On 2, it may well be that at the end of the process on 2 that I will recommend under count on it overrepresentation. And the reason is, as we begin to balance population, once you get, say, 5%, 6% maximum deviation, as you try to get down closer to 0, particularly in minority districts, you probably are going to end up moving in more Anglos than minority voters or minority residents. And so as you try to get closer and closer to perfect under one person, one vote, you may be getting farther and farther away from a fairly drawn district. And there's probably more art than science to that. It may be more in the eye of the beholder. But that's why that I won't probably be recommending that you try to get as close to 0 as possible. The only time that's required in this whole process is for the congressional, which the Supreme Court requires to be de minimis. And when we redistricted last time at the state level, the 36 congressional seats, and we looked at the congressional seat with the most population and that with the least, how many people difference do you think we ended up with? And the answer is less than 1 person. It was a fraction of a person. And it was that way because we can do it that way, based on, again, our April Fool's numbers and the computer programming that makes that a possibility to go down to the block level. Okay. That's just a comparison of those 2 slides. You can look at that later. I've talked about that. Can you go? Okay. I said at the beginning that I'm not here to tell you how to redistrict. I'm here to get you as close to the plan you'd like to have as possible. These are some of the things that drive how lines get drawn and which can either be problems for you if they're ignored or can be assets for you if they're followed. And so Bush v. Vera simply talks, and you see the quotation there. And of course, that was Governor Bush in the Bush v. Vera. The horns of the dilemma is the U.S. Supreme Court has said you cannot make race or ethnicity the driving factor in drawing lines, that's a violation of equal protection going the other direction. It's a reverse racial gerrymander. So the horns of the dilemma are under Section 2 and Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, where we must be cognizant of and not unnecessarily harm voting access of protected minorities. If that becomes your only object, then a non-protected minority might well challenge the plan as a reverse racial gerrymander and a violation of equal protection. So this is where it really does become more art than science. How far can you go without having gone too far? My colleague David Gwynn was at a conference and Judge Scalia was there. And he asked Justice Scalia if the Supreme Court wouldn't give us some guidance on how that balance should be struck. He says, you know, those of us working in the trenches feel like you kind of owe that to us. And he says, Justice Scalia said, Prof, you're right. We owe you that. And you know what? You ain't gonna get it. It's like trying to define reasonableness. You can't really come up with a rule other than to say, we'll look at it and we'll consider your reasons for doing it and we'll consider the alternatives. But those are the things that really, protecting incumbency, for example, and if you'll notice, most of these don't have anything to do with you. We protect your incumbency because you're the people the voters in your district put here. We're protecting their choice, not you. Maintaining the core of existing districts. You can end up doing something that balances population and actually looks good unless you know a little bit more about it. And so, for example, Councilmember Palmer, let's suppose we move 1,000 people into 4 and move 1,000 people out. And at the end, the minority profile actually looks a little bit better on that spreadsheet. But what you tell us if we're trying to do this is, look, you moved in 1,000 people who have not been politically active. And you've moved out 1,000 people who have been. And so while the numbers look good, the possibility of electing a candidate of choice of a protected minority has been reduced. And that's where you as council members need to help me. I mean, I've sat up there. I think you know your council district pretty much as well as I knew mine, though yours are harder now, they're bigger. Jim, I don't know if you know yours or not. That's
There's a bunch of them.
if you knew it yesterday, you may not today. So, you know, community of interest. You know, we have this salient or barbell that looks strange. If you've looked at our city council map, you see how we run out to TSTC. And we run out along a road, along a right-of-way. By necessity, we do that to get through Belmead. But that's something that'll jump right out. And if doing something like that was done to reduce or to increase a racial or ethnic population, there would be some significant equal protection questions coming up with that, because our council districts are supposed to be in one piece, and drawing these little salient. We used to do the same thing out to the McGregor Airport. And then I think through interlocal agreement back when I was mayor, we reduced that a good bit. Would you please go to the next slide? This is what you were waiting for. In summary, the speaker says, Will Rogers said, an optimist is someone who looks for a hat and coat when the speaker says in summary. Here's the process. The way that I have always done it, and the way I would suggest we do it, is when we get the numbers, I will come to the council and show you what the numbers are under the existing lines. And I also will bring at that time, not a proposal, but an example of a plan that satisfies the legal requirements with as little change as possible to the district lines, protecting the core of each of the districts, protecting incumbency, and use that as a starting point for the discussion. I find putting something like that up, for the most part, people find things about it they like and agree on, and usually there are things that they don't like and would like to see changed. But that gets the discussion started, and probably in 30 or 40% of the 50 or 60 of these that I used to do every time, the end of the process would go right back to that first plan, because I've done a lot of these. That, I think I've run out of things to say I know anything about. Can I answer any questions?
Thanks, Mayor. Any questions for?
This is Holmes. Professor Morrison, great presentation. I've taken copious notes here, and I guarantee you that I would do better on this material than I did in my torts class 40 years ago from you. But
I don't recall that at all.
that was, yeah, it would have been better. Anything would have been better, probably. One quick question. Does the city run an independent redistricting process, obviously from the county and the state, but does ours need to be ratified upstream, or once we come up with it, we're good? We don't need any other?
No, there's been one change in the election code since the last go-round that really affects the county more than the city.
Okay.
You want the long or the short version
Long.
of this, Jim? Okay. Under the election code, Dylan, I'll make it short. Be a short, long one. Up until the interstices between now and the last redistricting, the election code's been amended. At one time, a county election precinct could not split a congressional district line, a state house line, a state senate line, a state board of education line, or a council district line in a city of 10,000 or more. That last has been taken out. So you're completely independent of the county, the school district, MCC, the state of Texas. What you aren't independent of is you're going to have to live with some of the lines, because if you vary much from city, county, state lines, you end up splitting those voters into two separate ballots. And so this is where Kathy Van Wolf's office in the past and now ongoing has been very helpful. And in the past, we've gotten the county, city, school district, and MCC to share election precincts. probably not as important now from the standpoint of the voter because you've got so many choices of where to go vote, but still important from the standpoint of whoever's printing and paying for those ballots. You know, how many separate ballots do you want? So the greater the commonality, the easier that election process will be. But beyond that, you're completely independent on how you draw the lines.
Okay, thank you, Professor.
Any other questions, comments?
Professor, thank you so much for this very informative presentation. And as one of the three of us who, actually four of us, lived through the first November partisan general election, which hopefully never again, can you give us some predictions of what the likelihood of a nonpartisan, newly redistricted 2022 election in May is, as well as using the old districts, May 2022, or putting us on another partisan cycle?
Well, I think that back in 1983, Professor Gwynn and I represented the governor's office in Austin, three-judge court, the Secretary of State's office in Dallas, three-judge court. And in that process, the state got together with the plaintiffs and Hart Graphics, which does the ballots for most elections, and in a period of about 3 weeks, arranged an election in Texas. It can be done if the state has a dog in that fight. I could give you an opinion, but it'd be worth just what you paid for it. I think that the state is incentivized to have a 2021 election, excuse me, a 2022 election under new lines because it wants those 2 new congressional seats. And I think that they anticipate drawing them in a way that they'll probably be Republican seats. I don't know to what extent and I think the state will care about counties because again, they're red and blue elections. I don't know what will happen with a March primary, Super Tuesday primary. It wouldn't surprise me to see it move to May. And if it were, I would imagine the city election is going to stay at the same time. You're going to have the same sort of an experience then. It's just, it'll be a primary instead of a general election. That would be a guess. As I said at the beginning, I think we will know more once the state is actually in the process of redistricting and can gauge how soon it can be through and what that does to the election calendar. Because if they get the numbers in mid to late August and we get them on September 30th, you know, the elections for the county and the state have to be called well before the end of the year, and filing has to happen well before the end of the year because they got a March primary. I think it would ease some of that tension to move the primary to May. Of course, the legislature can do what it wants. It can create another uniform election day if it wants to. It's too early to tell. When I talk to Ledge Council, they're not sure which way they're going to jump. They're still trying to figure out how to get the Democrats to come back to the House.
In 2012, there was a similar situation. Were those 2 dates, the partisan primary in then May and our local nonpartisans, on the same date?
Josh, it wasn't a problem. Councilman Warder, it wasn't a problem back then because we all got our numbers in February.
Got it.
And back then, the only delay was for the county, for example. We had to wait until the state had finished the House, Senate, and Congressional to know where we could draw election precinct lines and county commissioner court lines where we didn't end up with a bunch of little bitty election precincts. So that was the delay there. But you know, that was all done in August. And by August, we're not even going to have numbers.
Do you expect the May 2022 ballot for the city to have the new, do you expect our lines to be drawn by that time?
I think we can if we move quickly, and as we get closer to, there's things that we've done in the past that have been helpful at the Justice Department, not as helpful substantively. For example, a Citizens Advisory Committee, where each council member appointed some people. You sort of had a shadow group going along the process. That adds a lot of time. That probably adds 3 or 4 weeks to the process. And as we get closer, my recommendation could be this time, they've elected you, let's have you work with them, and then I work with you. So there's some things that we can do, that I can do, that will help get us there. But in doing that, we may have to do things 90% of the way we wish we could, rather than 100. It's kind of like, how close do you want to get that population down? What are the costs? But as I think we should get back together in October or September. We should have a good feel from census if they're really going to be able to meet that. Hopefully by then the state will have sent out some signals on what it intends to do with the election calendar, and we can make some informed decisions at that time.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Any other questions?
Thank you all very
Hey, sir.
much.
Great to see you. All right, Bradley, I'll turn it back over to you for, I believe, our last work session. Do we have?
No.
That's right.
It might be our most creative work session. This is work session 2021-372, which is a discussion of wayfinding project, parking and summer events in Public Improvement District Number 1. We're actually going to be joined via Zoom, I believe, by Jeffrey Vitarius from City Center Waco, along with representatives from Civic Brand, to talk through really a pretty innovative wayfinding project that Jeffrey and the team are leading up for the summer to improve the connections between parking and merchants. So if we can get Jeffrey in, and we'll start the presentation.
I believe our timeline for this is 35 minutes.
And we are like right on time. We're still, Jeffrey, I heard your voice there. We're still tinkering on getting your screen here. Okay, there you are.
Hey, Jeffrey.
Hello. And I believe Lane, there we go. Thank you, City Council. Thank you, City staff, for working closely with us on this project. We're really excited to bring it to you. Lane, could you go ahead and forward to the next slide? I wanted to start by providing y'all with some background and context for the project. So based on Convention and Visitor Bureau numbers, staff is projecting that over 450,000 people will be visiting Waco this summer. And we anticipate that many, if not most, of those individuals will be visiting downtown at some point in time. So acknowledging the unique impact of the COVID-19 crisis on downtown and this opportunity, the Downtown Public Improvement District has activated over $130,000 in funding for some downtown activations. These programs include the currently operating open air downtown trolley that you may have seen driving around, homelessness outreach, direct programming and activation, some increased parking activation, and a marketing campaign. However, at the center of all of this, the centerpiece is a strategy that will be based in the $100,000 contract with Civic Brand for space making and wayfinding downtown. And there we go. The goals of the project are to create a more pleasant pedestrian experience, improve connections between the Silo District and downtown parking, encourage visitors to wander from the Silo District to other downtown districts, and increase awareness of downtown parking activities and merchants. Go ahead, Lane. And then kind of around this project, and Lane will get into more details on the project itself, there are certain kind of add-on elements to really take that $100,000 of investment to the next level. There will be a marketing campaign associated with it called Summer of Downtown. There is going to be active programming of 7th Street with pop-up events. And then as we actually proceed, should council vote to approve this program, with the installation of the project, there will be community engagement events. So for example, should we proceed, not this Wednesday, but next Wednesday, we'd be having an outdoor painting event to actually paint 7th Street. We've also been looking at the 6th Street corridor, which is pivotal to the project, and looking for every beautification option we have to just take that corridor to the next level. And that's presented here on the map below. Red boxes were areas where we might want to fix up something, and blue boxes were areas where there isn't necessarily anything amiss, but there was options for potentially expanding what's already present. And then finally, we'll be activating some new parking spaces. As Lane will get into details in his part of the presentation, there will be some loss of parking as part of the project on 6th Street. However, we are working to activate other parking spaces in downtown. Currently, we have agreements on about 98 of them, but we're looking to bring on even more as we proceed with the project. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Lane Ferguson with Civic Brand, who will be taking us through the project itself. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Thank you guys for having me today. My name is Lane Ferguson. I am the Director of Placemaking for Civic Brand. So Civic Brand is an agency with over a decade of experience in consulting and design and marketing for cities all across the nation. And we're a team of strategists, creatives, and placemakers, and our goal is to really help communities tell their story. So tell you a little more about this project. We were brought in by City Center Waco a couple months ago, and we were tasked with kind of coming up with what is the best way to get the visitors that are coming to downtown Waco to get to actually explore more of downtown Waco that are, and so the ones that are coming to the Magnolia area, how do we get them to explore more of the downtown area? So the first thing we did after meeting with different board members and different city staff is we walked the area ourselves. And a big thing we saw is the diversity of different wayfinding methods that currently exist in the downtown area that don't necessarily work together. And so part of Civic Brand, what we do is we like to look at the overall downtown brand and how that's put to the built environment. And so you see here a few images of there are some maps and some signage that talks about parking. And there's even scooters that help people to get around the downtown area. But you see pictures to your right is signage that isn't necessarily clear, and then even blocks that don't have a pathway for pedestrians that are trying to walk from one part of downtown to another. You guys are doing great things like the trolley to encourage people to move around downtown. But we really feel like with this interventions this summer, we can add more wayfinding to make people want to dwell longer in the downtown area. So what's the real problem behind the parking problem? To us, and something we've talked about with a lot of PID board members as well as city staff, is we really feel like the real problem is a walking problem. We want people to walk around downtown Waco. Like Jeffrey said, when you're expecting almost 500,000 people to come into downtown Waco, it's a really good problem that you have all these people coming there. And so how do we get them to get out of that bubble of just circling around Magnolia to find the best parking spot when there's really so much more to offer in downtown Waco, especially in Austin Avenue and the other sub-districts that make up downtown Waco? And so we looked at this from two different angles, a visitor's angle and a local's angle. Visitors can't find parking because they aren't aware of parking. Visitors aren't aware of places to park because they aren't aware of things to see beyond Magnolia. And visitors aren't aware of where to explore beyond Magnolia because they naturally go to where it feels like there's activity. And from the local perspective, locals can't find parking because they aren't willing to walk very far to get to their destination. Locals aren't willing to walk far because they aren't looking to explore. And locals aren't looking to explore because they think they know what to expect from a downtown visit. And so we took this into consideration through the design and build of this project. So just to kind of give you a quick background of what we've done and where we're headed, is after a project introduction from City Center, we walked the site to kind of get our own take on it and from there we created a concept plan and audit. And we presented that to different city staff, to PID board members, traffic department, and other stakeholders in the community. We went back to Waco about a month ago and did another walk and talk where we invited those parties to come walk the area with us and talk through the demonstration. Where we're at right now is we want to put that into a demonstration. So temporary is something we really find valuable in the design process. I think cities, they like to, a lot of times we see cities spending tons of money on plans, but don't ever actually get to see things put down on the ground and test them. And so here we really want to test different wayfinding solutions that can better help downtown Waco. During the demonstration, we'll collect data and give final recommendations. So from a place identity perspective, there's a lot of great groups advocating for the downtown Waco area. And so we really see that these different entities are promoting them, and we want to figure out how they can work better together. But from there, we see how that doesn't really necessarily work in the downtown environment. And you see very different looks as you go in and out through downtown, and how can the brand better be presented in the physical space of downtown Waco. And so right now, based on our audit, we really see downtown Waco as a disconnected set of districts where Magnolia dominates as the defining attraction. but we truly believe what it could be is a collection of vibrant, walkable districts where each has its own unique sense of place and assets that encourage even more people to explore. And so the demonstration we're wanting to provide is really kind of building the foundation for how to make this downtown Waco that collection of vibrant and walkable districts. From this, we're trying to do 4 things for this summer. We're going to launch a summer campaign featuring a placemaking demonstration and introducing the downtown brand to Waco. Something that we noticed is the downtown Waco brand that's been put together by the PID board and the PID district. It's used really well in the digital realm, but it's nowhere to be seen anywhere in the downtown Waco in its physical realm. So we're really trying to launch that. You'll see that in the colors we're going to present here soon.
So I'm sorry to interrupt, but just wanted to say for the record, Councilmember Bearfield is joining us remotely at this time. Sorry about that, Lane.
Welcome, Councilmember.
So further, we're trying to connect the Silo District to Austin Avenue through a continuous pathway. We're also trying to turn 7th Street into a pedestrian plaza on Austin Avenue, and we're running to add signage for free parking for local and visitors to be more aware of where they can park in the downtown area. So this is the Summer of Downtown branding that we hope to launch next week. And you see this as a placemaking demonstration to reimagine downtown Waco. Like I said, again, the whole point of this is that we're just trying to do this for 2 months. And so making it temporary, I think, can remove a lot of the fear we have of changing downtown. And so just test things. And the goal of this is just to test things and really get people more comfortable in exploring the downtown area. Like I said earlier, we're really trying to connect Magnolia area to Austin Avenue. Just being 4 blocks away, you're really not that far. But if you're in the Magnolia area, there's really no way of knowing how close you are to Austin Avenue. And so to do that, we're trying to make a connected pathway. The side we're working on of the street, there's a big piece on one of the blocks that doesn't even have a sidewalk on it. And so this is really a dual pedestrian experience if you're trying to make your way from Magnolia to Austin Avenue or Austin Avenue down to Magnolia. The street section we're looking at here is 42 feet in width. And what we're proposing is to take away the parking on one side of the street and give that to pedestrians for the summer. And so to do that, we would remove parking this upcoming week and paint this whole pathway, as well as put barriers to make a safe and protected walkway for pedestrians. In an ideal situation, we would have this be a car protected pathway. And so, but again, as a demonstration, we're just proposing something to just test it out. And so to not move the center line and reduce lane widths, the easiest way to do this would be to remove parking on that side of the street. We're wanting to introduce the colors of the Downtown Waco brand into all 4 blocks of this. And so as you can see, we're using 4 blocks, and each block will have its own color that's identified also in the Downtown Waco brand. We're using these barriers as a protection between the pathway and the travel lanes. And the barriers will have different signage on them. That's a mix of downtown branding, the Summer of Downtown campaign branding, but most importantly, wayfinding. And so it'll direct people to free parking, but also direct them to other attractions in the downtown area, including Austin Avenue and the Farmers Market and Dr. Pepper Museum. The 7th Street Plaza, this is an area we identified when we were walking through the downtown Waco area as this really great scale street that's underutilized for pedestrian activity. And so from Austin Avenue over to the alleyway in between Franklin and Austin, we're wanting to block this street off to cars for the summer and give it to pedestrians. And so one of the community engagement pieces we're wanting to do here, as Jeffrey mentioned earlier, is paint this as a street mural and invite the community to come paint this with us. And so all of these paints would be temporary and they can be power washed at the end, but they're going to be durable enough to stay for the 2 months of this project. Further on that, we're adding lights to this alleyway. And so it'll be able to be activated at all times of the day. We're adding seating and activities, and we're going to block this area off with planters. We're also launching different new banners that will go into the downtown area that explains the project, but also launches more of this downtown brand into the downtown area. So seeing the Summer of Downtown campaign work while also explaining that there's keep going, there's more to do in downtown Waco. And so really, again, encouraging the visitor experience to keep exploring more of downtown while you're in Waco. We'll be adding signage onto where current parking exists, as well as where free parking was going to be for this summer activity. And so our team's been working with different stakeholders and property owners in the area to let us use their parking, since we are taking away some of that parking on 6th Street. We're wanting to actually add even more parking by getting to use some of these surface lots for the summer. Here's two lots that we've been working pretty closely with, and the city's been working hard to help us use these for the summer. But as you can see, these would add a lot of parking to the downtown area. And so as people are trying to circle around the Magnolia area, again, we're trying to push them up to be closer to downtown and park kind of more in the downtown area and get to walk and explore not only the Magnolia area, but get to walk and explore Austin Avenue and Farmers Market area. And then finally, we're working on a solution for the city's downtown garage, and we're wanting to add some signage here. This won't be done in the next week if this is approved for demonstration, but it will be done at some point in July. That we're wanting to add art to this garage to really add what's kind of a gray space to add some more color and life to this block of the downtown area. But then further, this is a really good asset for the downtown area and the free parking that it offers. And so we're wanting to make it clear to drivers how to enter this area and how to better explore, get to park here and get to better explore the downtown area. Our project timeline is we're wanting to implement this project next week. We're ready to go. And so it'll take all week to get everything painted and get signs up and the barricades up. But we hope to have an event at the end of that and really get to launch this placemaking project that Friday evening. And then, like I said earlier, the project we hope to stay up for 2 months, and that'll allow us to collect enough data to get to see if any of these can become permanent installations in the future. Thank you guys so much for.
Jeffrey, we turn it back to you.
Yes, sir. So we are here. If the city council has any questions about the project, we can certainly answer them.
Awesome.
Or at least take them down and get back with you.
Any comments or questions for Jeffrey or Civic Brand?
Jeffrey, I'll jump in here. I am so excited seeing this. I love the color. I love the cohesive branding. I am conflicted and will no longer be talking. Thanks, Jennifer.
That's okay.
Jeffrey.
Ms. Holmes, I love the color and the rebranding.
I'll pick up for you.
Thank you, Stuart.
Jeffrey, thank you so much for the presentation. Lane, I appreciate your time. I have to say I love this as well. I think this is going to be, I think, first of all, let me say I commend on a test run that it's not something permanent just yet, but let's test it to see how it works and to see how it goes. I have to say that I love the concepts that were shown here on our screen. And so I'm excited about it. I do have a few questions for you, Jeffrey, and so part of me will kick in my marketing background, so please bear with me. Earlier you said, well, first of all, how did we come up with the name Summer of Downtown? Was that a group effort, or is that just a name that was designed?
Yeah, it actually kind of grew organically out of some staff discussions. We've been talking about these various different initiatives we had planned for the summer. And I think Wendy Gregg, our communications director, at one point just said, it really feels like the summer of downtown. And it just kind of stuck. It had that stickiness to it. It kept coming up in conversations. And, ultimately, we were looking for a way to reference the whole suite of things we were doing. And it was like, that sounded like it just rung true to us. And on top of that, I feel that there's a vibrancy to it. If the timing were perfect, it'd be the spring of downtown. But I feel like summer has a similar kind of vibrant, thriving feel to it after what's been a fairly difficult time between COVID and Snowvid for downtown. So that's kind of how we were approaching it.
I think just for the way my mind works, if we are directing our marketing efforts to tourists, Summer of Downtown includes nothing about Waco, even though we know they're in Waco, but it has nothing to do with Waco. So maybe just an idea of exploring a different name, or maybe how we can add on to it to just give it more a nod to Waco feel, I think. While I think Summer of Downtown is great, it could be used in Austin, Dallas, Irving, et cetera, things like that. So just something to ponder about. Earlier in your presentation, you made a comment about homelessness outreach. What did you mean by that?
Yes, sir. We are right now. Are we clear to?
Councilmember Sabito, we are not posted to talk about homelessness issues.
It was just in the slide, so that's why I was wondering.
Yeah, I recognize that. But we're not posted to talk very much in depth about homelessness.
Well, I guess I was just
issues.
trying to see what he meant by the homelessness outreach in the slide.
Jeffrey, if you would just, have a very short response, that'd be great.
Yes, ma'am. We're working to engage with a partner for there to be a staffed person downtown to directly engage with the homeless or the residents experiencing homelessness downtown. That's what we're referencing there.
How has the feedback from the local vendors downtown been?
So far about the project?
Yes, sir.
With the vendors we've interacted with, the merchants we've interacted with, I believe there's been some broad enthusiasm for it. There were concerns about parking, as one would expect, and that's part of why we've been really active in pursuing parking strategies to relieve that anxiety that some merchants may feel.
Okay. And then I think you guys in your presentation showed slides of maybe some barriers that were going to be where people walk and between where the street is at. Do we think that is sufficiently safe for our pedestrians? Let me put it that way.
I believe so, though on that point, I will defer to Lane. He's had more direct involvement in procuring the barriers.
Okay.
I'm sorry, was your question was it about safety?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Yeah, so this has definitely had some precedents before. Georgetown does this every Saturday where they take away their parking or at these exact barricades to give people extra space. And so this has definitely been done in other cities before. We've looked at a lot of delineator options. My personal, I guess, and professional opinion would be that delineators, such as like bike posts, which you may normally see, really don't offer much safety to the pedestrian experience. Whereas I think these would offer a lot more safety than that.
Okay, thank you for that. And then the last question that I have is, I fully acknowledge that all of our visitors that come into Waco, or downtown Waco for that matter, are not necessarily just predominantly Spanish speakers. Has any thought been given of doing some signs in Spanish as well?
Yes, absolutely. So we will also have some sort of signage that has surveys that we're doing. One side will be in English and one side will be in Spanish. And then we are currently working on some of these barricade signage that has some of the wayfinding for some of those to be in Spanish as well.
Wonderful. I'm so glad to hear that. And, besides those questions, thank you so much. This presentation or this resolution that's on our agenda has my full support, and so I'm excited to see this come to fruition this summer. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
This is Holmes. Just a couple quick questions. Can you go back to slide 14? I didn't understand. I want to understand that one. The concentric circles and the branding. We didn't. Would you spend like 20 seconds explaining what that is?
Yeah, definitely. Let me pull it up real quick. So this is what we put together, and we can share this, but we created a complete kind of audit based off of our findings of each district in the downtown area. And then what we're trying to show in this is how the different entities that are working in the downtown Waco area, how they're being portrayed from a brand or place audit experience. And so a lot of the work we do is, there's a lot of, like I said, quasi-city committees and different nonprofits that are working for downtown brands. And so our minds kind of go to a branding effort when it comes to how those are being portrayed into the public and how those brands work together. And so what we're trying to show here is, one, to be honest, kind of a disconnect in a lot of the branding that is currently in the downtown Waco area, especially from an organizational level, of how those brands necessarily don't work together, but they do have common goals and who they're trying to represent. And so, as you can see, that downtown Waco brand in the middle is kind of where we see that brand house of that covers a lot of the different districts that are in the Waco area. And so this is kind of our way of better showing the different groups that are in Waco that are doing great jobs in promoting the downtown area. But that's something that we hope to recommend from our final recommendations is better ways to help brand these organizations from a pedestrian experience of how they know how they work and work together to promote downtown.
And so this, this effort more works between Silo District and, I guess, Austin Avenue District, though, right? I mean, I know we're looking at the whole thing holistically, but this solution seems to me to be focused on a couple of them. Is that?
That's right. Yeah, we on our original visit, we toured all sub-districts, but right now we're just focusing on how Austin Avenue and the Silo District and connecting those.
Okay. I like the intentionality of this thing. I know that we, when we first, Magnolia kind of, as tours started coming in, we were very intentional about getting the trolley in place and getting people around. And now we're kind of doing the same thing here with pedestrian and walking traffic. I think it's very important to show tourists all the parts of, all of these parts of the placemaking that we established several years ago. Just get them around and give them directions. I think that's a great idea. I have some of the same reservations as Mayor Pro Tem Savito on the Summer of Downtown, because we're kind of doing some sub-branding here on this. I don't want summer to be over and we've created this cool brand of Summer of Downtown and then it's fall, or, it's like, it seems like we've wasted some energy on the branding. I'm not an expert on that though, so I'll yield to the marketing folks on that. But anyway, good. I love the direction this is going. It sounds good.
I just want to first of all, thank City Center Waco staff, again, just for your dedication to our downtown, being in the trenches and really jumping in and doing something that I think is really exciting. One thing I want to note about this is that it's being funded, correct me if I'm wrong here, Jeffrey, but this will be funded by the PID, correct? Oh, Councilmember Bearfield, I'm so sorry. Do you want to jump in?
I was wondering, I was like, wait a minute.
I know. Go for it.
So, good afternoon, everyone. In my quest for continued education, forgive my tardiness, and I but saw half of this, but what I saw, I liked. I do have some questions and then statements regarding some of my other fellow council members' comments. One, Jeffrey and Lane, what are the metrics for this? What will success look like at the end of our Summer of Downtown?
Yeah, great question. So we will be doing a couple different ways of how to measure this. One is going to be surveys that will be available through an online website we're currently creating that anyone that can use a QR code to take the survey, and it'll go from a visitor experience or you can choose a local experience. So we're hoping to differentiate those as well. But those questions will ask a variation of where they like to see something like this become permanent, but also encourage them to explore more of downtown Waco. Where did they go when they were using this? Was wayfinding signage helpful? And so a variation of questions like that. And then we're also, from a different side of this, also looking for more of a softer approach, so more of a qualitative things of different emotions. And so, what is the distance of, when a mom is walking with parents are walking with their children, do they feel comfortable letting their children walk 50 feet ahead of them because this is the protected pathway? And so it's going to have a mix of those. And then our team is actually going to be down later this week to start measuring the amount of people that are currently walking on 6th Street. And we will put that against the amount of people that are walking there once this is installed.
Gotcha. Okay. Sorry?
Yeah, no, and I would also like to add, one of the things that at least the PID staff are going to have extra eyes on is if we're able to move the needle on parking behavior downtown. So we just got a pre-installation count this past weekend, and post-installation, I'd like to go out and get another count on some critical parking lots just to see if we were able to, how impactful that was on the parking behavior, because that's the importance of the PID, I think.
Sure. Okay, cool. Then regarding the slide Councilmember Holmes mentioned in the brand hierarchy, I was curious as to, in this, we're dealing specifically with this program, this test with Austin and Silo. When will we see future brands for the other districts?
That's something that's not currently in our scope of work, but it's something we
Okay.
definitely want to recommend as a
In the strategic plan?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, awesome. Go ahead.
Sorry, and I'd also like to add that Lane and the team at Civic Brand did complete a brand audit of all of the districts. So we actually those slides into this presentation, but there is a district focus slide that they did when they came down for their site visit for each one of the districts. Yes, ma'am.
And that's available if we wanted to see it?
Yes, ma'am. We can definitely share that out.
Very good. So I think this is neat. The Main Street and me is real happy about this because it speaks to the how and why we move and activate sales. It is placemaking, literally and figuratively. I am not in agreement with my council members in the marketing and branding of the Summer of Downtown being a bit ambiguous, because I promise if you put a W in as a watermark behind it, the people will get it. And marketing is temporary. So I think that there's no intention of this being longstanding. I think this is something that you don't put a lot of money in, you put it up quick. I mean, we marketed downtown Waco on Corex boards that we had printed at W Promotions. So I know that temporary things can happen and be nimble. I do think that if this is successful, when it's successful, then you've got to put real thought into how you want to sell this. Because, seasonal things, there can be seasonal themes for downtown. There can be seasonal themes per district. I think we are creating a strong enough footprint that we don't have to be that unilateral in thinking. I think we can, with the creation of TikTok, all things are temporary. So I think it's important that we change the way we think about how we market and brand our city, our downtown specifically, our districts more specifically. So I think this is great. I'm excited about the work that's coming out of City Center. I totally love the parking and activating that parking area, because I think that that's one of those things that people will be like, oh, I didn't even think about that. And they will, and they'll use it because they never thought about it in that space, because it never looked like that was for them. So I think that we've got some awesome possibilities here. I'm very concerned about what the metrics look like and how we're measuring them and how we engage and communicate what that looks like. But other than that, I'm excited. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Very good. Jumping back in, one thing I wanted to highlight is that this is being paid for by the PID fund, and I think that's important for our constituents to bear in mind. The PID fund is a source of funding that basically, if you live within a zone in a part of downtown, then you pay into it annually, and we've accumulated dollars with the PID has accumulated dollars with which to spend these funds. And so this isn't coming out of the general fund. This isn't other members of the community's property taxes or sales tax going into this. This is people who live in downtown. The PID actually has a board that advises City Center Waco staff on how to spend those funds. And so I think it's important to remember the funding source for this project. And that's what the PID was designed to do. That's why the people that live or work or own property in downtown designed or bought into having this fund was so that hopefully strategic activation can take place. So that was one thing I think it's important to just highlight. As people hear of a project like this, they're like, man, how is that getting paid for? It's always important to bear that in mind, I think. I love that this is a pilot program, as that's been mentioned. I think that, it won't be perfect, but jumping in there, going quick, moving, it feels like City Center staff sprung into action when they're like, okay, this is what's happening after COVID. This is going to be a normal summer. We got to go quick. And with that might come some imperfections, but I applaud the eagerness for that staff to work hard, to really do something exciting and tangible, that I think is, again, we'll learn in these 2 months and see, okay, that worked, that didn't, that worked, that didn't. I think, to my co-council members' points about the branding, I think, one thing that I really have said before and feel strongly about is it's worthwhile for us to do an in-depth, heavy conversation about what our brand is, as well. But for the purposes of moving quick, I'm excited for that. But if there are opportunities to add that Waco flair, I think that's a great idea as well. I think this is a project that's going to have a good ROI because we're thinking about how to economically activate other parts of our downtown and make sure that waymaking is occurring. One question I had, Jeffrey, I don't know if you have these numbers handy, but what is the number of spots that we'll lose on, do you have those numbers handy? The spots that we'll lose on-street parking, but then the spots that you're likely to gain through some of these other private parking spots that have previously been closed off, but we'll have access to now.
Yes, sir. So the spots that we lost on 6th Street are approximately 45.
45, and that's from Austin. That's from Austin to Webster. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And that's one side of 6th Street, correct?
Yes, sir. So the parking on the other side of 6th Street will remain.
Great. Okay.
And right now we are at least likely to get 98 spots off street. And I'm confident that we'll be able to bring approximately 100 more on top of that. But I'm not as confident in those as the other 98.
Great.
So we will potentially double the amount of parking, if not triple it.
And then the other obvious part of that is that we're trying to get people into these garages. So that 98 doesn't even include the big downtown Waco garage that we're trying to get people into, that's underutilized right now, although open to the public. So just commend again, moving quick to try to get, people lots that have been closed off to the public for public use that are private lots. Several of these that I know that y'all have worked with are sitting vacant right now. So y'all springing into action and working deals with them. And I want to thank those private parking lot owners too. Let's show them honor too whenever those are ready to be publicly announced. I think I liked what Councilmember Barefield said about exploring future districts. I think that there could be some strategy for that. Again, I love the pilot program nature of this to kind of see how this works, but to explore future districts. Are there going to be other signs, kind of like as you enter downtown, at any level, waymaking from I don't know, I'm thinking like University Parks and or 4th and 5th Street and I-35 that kind of say code this way to get to this space. Any thoughts around that?
We don't currently have that in the works, but I think it's a great idea to add signage, especially as you're leaving 35 to direct people to downtown. So we can definitely look into adding that for next week.
I think that might be an inexpensive but strategic move to make sure that kind of look at all of the gateways into downtown and make sure that there are you were strategically directing people at the gateways too, to get
Definitely.
to these locations. And then I know that you said the permanent sign on the garage won't be soon, but again, just an idea, and y'all are way further in the weeds on this than me, but I don't know if there's value in doing a temporary banner that just says free parking, like a big, good-looking temporary sign that says free parking here. If we're doing this pilot program, it seems to make sense that while we're waiting for the installation of a permanent sign, a big banner on our city-owned parking garage where that permanent sign is, just hang a big banner there. Seems that could make some sense too.
Definitely.
But excited for the permanent sign as well. I think that's everything I had. My notes are messy, but this is gonna be great. I love that we're springing into action to really try to activate our downtown. An activated, robust, vibrant downtown is a goal of this council. It's important for our city's economy as a whole to have a strong downtown, and an organization like City Center and Civic Brand as well springing into action and working hard to really make sure that we're seizing the opportunities that are before us, I think is a really exciting thing. So I appreciate y'all's work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Meek and council members. We really appreciate your time today.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. All right, Bradley, on to the next work session.
On to the next. Next up, we've got work session 373, which is a discussion of the city's website content management system and website redesign, as well as resident engagement solutions. That's going to be Mike Seawright joining me at the table here. He's our Chief Information Officer. I believe this is his first council presentation, if I remember right. And I can't think of two better projects for him to be discussing with the council today. These are both high priority projects for the council and myself. The first being the selection of a vendor for the website, which is also on as a resolution this afternoon. And then he'll talk about, in the second part of his presentation, the new resident engagement app for common requests like code compliance issues, or there's a dead animal on my street, or high grass and weeds, things of that nature. I'm very appreciative to Mike and the team behind him that are leading these projects. I think they're going to really make a big impact for our residents in engaging with their local government. Mike?
Thank you, Bradley. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I appreciate this opportunity, and I'm excited to present our recommendations to acquire a new content management system with professional services that will be used to redesign and enable a new City of Waco website. I also have an update for you on a separate project that I know that you're interested in, that will allow us to enable a citizen engagement app to centralize and modernize resident engagement and request. As we started the website project, we looked at the City of Waco strategic goals, and specifically the goal to build a high-performing city government. In addition, we wanted to enable a City of Waco website that puts the resident needs at the forefront of every design decision we make. To accomplish this, we developed the following goals for our new design and new content management system. Our first goal is centered around a modernized mobile user experience and a mobile-first design strategy for our new website. Our next goal is to deliver two-way resident engagement solutions that increase transparency, improve how we communicate with our customers, and enables the ability to measure the data and the interactions that support this goal. Our next goal on this list is to create efficiencies for our customers and the city staff with web-enabled solutions that modernize our business processes. This last goal on this slide is to enable solutions that make the City of Waco more accessible and transparent to our customers in best-in-class web-enabled solutions. The next goal is to empower our city departments to manage their departmental websites, to improve online business processes, make our departments more agile, and enhance how we communicate with our customers. The second goal on the slide is to enable a website that has a built-in analytics to measure success and to continuously look for ways to improve our website presence. And our last goal is to stay data-driven and user-centered as we design our new website with the focus on the user experience for our residents. Before we released the RFP for our new content management system and consulting services to redesign our website, we identified the features and functionality for our selection criteria. I did not include all the features and functionality that we included in the RFP, but I will highlight a few that we think are important. In this day and time, our ability to enable multilingual websites is essential. We feel strongly that we need a more advanced set of tools for our departments to automate Spanish translations for our entire website. In addition, a tool that has the ability to translate to other languages is also important as well. A website that supports resident engagement strategies is critical in this day and time. Finding a solution that supports best-in-class features is essential in our efforts to enhance resident engagement and the user experience. E-commerce is another feature that we all agreed is a necessity in this day and time. Again, giving our city staff and departments an advanced set of tools to do business with our customers and improve the user experience is critical in this day and time. Content scheduling and automation is another key feature that we feel is important. This feature enables efficiencies and gives us the functionality to streamline processes and automate communications with our user community. A website that again has an enterprise level solution to assist our users with disabilities is a feature that is essential. To accomplish this, we need an easy-to-use tool that audits our website and ensures that we are enabling content that is accessible to all and especially accessible to our users with disabilities. And the last feature here is to find a website CMS that empowers our departments to be data-driven and to leverage analytics to improve the user experience as we strive to have the best government website possible. Our customers are expecting and almost demanding a mobile-friendly website that allows them to do business with us online 24/7, 365 without having to call us or on a phone or physically visit the City of Waco facility. I love this next slide, and it speaks to how important the user experience is. And if we can transfer our key business processes to the web, we can create solutions that make a difference for our user community. Engage our residents, enable efficiencies for the entire user community, and most importantly, reduce costs. As we finalize the CMS project charter with our goals and the features and functionality for the requirements for the IRFP, the CMS Review Committee released a request for a proposal in the fall. We received 13 proposals, which we narrowed down to our top 5. The CMS Review Committee went through multiple product demonstrations where we were able to ask and score each vendor based on their ability to meet the requirements within our RFP. Our top 2 vendors ended up being Revise and Open Cities, and again, we went through multiple product demonstrations to ensure that we were making the right decision. At the end of our evaluation process, it was clear that Open Cities had the best solution, and we were also very impressed with the Open Cities team. Just a little bit about Open Cities. They've been in business for 10 years. They deal strictly with government entities. And again, we were very impressed with their team, their developers, their project managers, and their approach to project management and their recent work in the .gov space. This next slide outlines our timeline from Open Cities, and it highlights the key milestones and their overall approach to project management. Each phase of this timeline is critical, from content audit, design, our strategy to migrate content, usability testing, marketing, training, and launching the full site with a new design, just to name a few. This is a massive project and a critical initiative to enable solutions that can truly make a difference for our residents. Managing this change and developing a strong communications plan to ensure that our user community and residents are prepared for this new website will be a major part of this initiative. The year 1 cost includes a one-time setup fee of $155,000 that is centered around project management, website design, content strategy, recommendations, usability testing, training for our web developers, and training for 25 City of Waco power users that will be trained to update their departmental websites. Our yearly renewal for years 2 through 5 for maintenance and support is $48,000 a year. This is a big investment, but one that we think is important to build a high-performing city government. We hope to start this project right away with an expected go-live in March of 2022. This is resolution number 2021-396 that is on your agenda. This slide here, I'd be remiss if I didn't say I really want to thank Dory Helm and Mr. William Conrad for helping us get this project to this point. This next slide is an update to council on our progress to enable a customized City of Waco branded mobile app that enables resident engagement. We know this initiative is important to council, and we're excited about the solutions that we're moving forward with. We have selected a solution from Rock Solid to enable a resident-friendly City of Waco branded mobile app to interact with our customers and to centralize resident engagement. We are also excited because Rock Solid and Open Cities have partnered on multiple websites and mobile app integrations in the past. What happened there? Empowering our residents and giving our city departments an advanced set of tools to manage resident requests is what excites us about the solution. The analytics and the reporting from Rock Solid is impressive, and it gives us the ability to generate a wide range of reports and customized reports for each council district. The Rock Solid solution also has support for multilingual translations. We are impressed with how the solution keeps residents' requests front and center while keeping the resident and city departments engaged with email and text notifications. Rock Solid has an impressive list of government customers, and we are excited to move this project forward. We are looking at a 3 to 4 month timeline to go live, and the yearly renewal is $46,000 a year for software maintenance and support. We are planning to start this project the 1st of July. And I know I went through that really fast.
Yes, sir, on Rock Solid, obviously, we've got that current City of Waco app that tells you what day your trash day is and which trash cans and recycle cans or yard waste cans to bring out to the curb. I assume that would be incorporated, that functionality would be incorporated to this new Rock Solid app. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. That's a great question. Cody Patillo and I have talked at length about that. And his comment to me was that he would let us go live, let us work the bugs out, and then he would also join in the solution so that we have one location for resident engagement. So that is the plan, yes, sir.
I think that app has a little icon on it of our City of Waco W with the star in it. Would that remain for the Rock Solid app, or do they have their own logo that they use for the app?
We will be able to customize that app to City of Waco branding.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much.
Hey, Mike, thank you again for the presentation. And I love it, by the way. I just have one quick question for you. How would we, or what is the communication plan to get out to our constituency once the change is made? And, you know, there'll be some time for them to get accustomed to the new platform. What does that look like?
You know, I envision us creating a website where we put that project in front of everyone. Show the new design early and often so people know what's coming. I think that's important. I know Dory will have some thoughts on that as well, and Ashley Nystrom. But absolutely, I think that's a big part of this project, to make sure people know what's coming.
Sure.
The link that's been there for a long time is probably not going to be there anymore. So we need to get prepared for that. Probably make sure we have a mechanism for people to call for support if they have questions. But yeah, absolutely, that'll be a big part of this initiative.
Thank you for that. And the reason I ask is because many of us, including myself, are creatures of habit. And
Absolutely.
when you throw something out the window that we've been accustomed to doing, apparently the world is turned upside down. But I think it's great that you're already thinking about that. So thank you. And
Yes,
great
sir.
presentation.
I just want to add that I really appreciate the fact that these solutions will be ADA accessible and offered in Spanish. Those feel like really huge wins as we move towards equity that includes a full range of lived experiences. One question for the app, does it have the functionality to have FAQs or a timeline? Like if someone was to submit something for a lost dog, that might be a quicker process than, say, addressing a hole in a sidewalk.
It sure does. We purchased that module, a knowledge base and FAQ, where we can start to add to those most common questions. If we continue to get question after question, we can add to that, include that, but absolutely, that comes with it.
I love that piece too, of just looking at the preservation of time and money in residents being empowered to have this information at their fingertips, as opposed to waiting to get an email to one of us finding answer from staff. It just feels like we are saving resources and time really effectively. So
Efficiency.
I'm excited. Yes. Our email inboxes will praise you.
This home's over here. So we really have two different, we got the website redesign and then this citizen engagement, two separate projects here, right? The Gantt chart, which I love, I think everybody knows I love Gantt charts. It's a great deal. That one is specifically to the content management system, correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Do we know what the implementation timeline is on the Rock Solid deal?
3 to 4 months is what they tell us. And with both initiatives, my plan is to really throw resources at it to make sure we stay within those timelines. But the Rock Solid is a 3 to 4 month go live date timeline.
So would you do that sequentially? You'd start that after you got the website, or can they run concurrently?
We're going to start both right away and
Okay.
get moving on them. Yes, sir. And we can enable the app before the website.
Great. One more question, Mike. I like this Rock Solid thing, because I think this is where citizen engagement is moving to, as my fellow council members have said. As they see, something wrong in the city or something, a pothole or whatever, they can report it immediately, get into prioritization, and get a report and see where it's at. And this is something we'll get concerned about down the road. If people really engage in this process and start using it, we have to make sure that on the city side of it, we have a response mechanism, infrastructure to address, there's a dead squirrel out in the road, or, the sidewalk has a crack in it, or, there was just an 18-car pileup on Waco Drive. Somehow to prioritize, review quickly, and I don't know what kind of manpower that is. And I don't know if Rock Solid gave any guidance as to what other cities use as far as response or manning of the city side of this, of citizen input. I don't know, is there even any kind of?
It's definitely council members.
Yeah, I don't expect it to be exact. I want to express a concern, and maybe we need to plan around that too.
Yeah,
to make this thing work.
It's definitely on our minds from a management team standpoint. You know, it's my expectation that people will report more issues to us than probably we've ever seen before. If we do this project right and deliver it correctly and market it correctly, we'll hear more about issues that aren't on our radar currently. And so I look forward to engaging with Lisa Blackman and others on our team that are kind of customer service focused folks to say, how do we set appropriate expectations? You know, like you were saying, pothole may take longer than picking up a dead animal. Set appropriate expectations and then also report out on, are we meeting those expectations? So while I don't have a crisp 1, 2, 3 of what that's going to look like, it is on our radar.
Understood. Thanks. Thanks, Mike.
And I would add to that Rock Solid really is a customer relationship management app. So it's got those back-end tools to manage those relationships with residents and then integrate with departments to make sure that they're getting those requests right away.
Great.
Personal touch.
Thanks, Mike.
Hi, Mike. Thank you for the presentation. Good to see you, not live, but not me, but with them. So tell the power user, that's the department heads, right?
It could be. I think
Okay.
we want to train those folks that are going to be updating the content on that website. So the department head will work with those department heads to make that decision who that employee is for those departments.
Okay. Okay, because I mean, even potentially if you go down to, because the way my mind is set up, this website could be in the most fluid thing that we have. And if it's an intern who's an influencer that needs to, you know, get some direct information on the site, I just want to make sure it's not limited to that. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. I think that would be our goal, is to give those folks training and then maybe train the trainer type model as well to allow other folks to get access. Yes.
And the other part is, thank you, Councilmember Holmes, because I was curious when the app went live, so I'm glad you asked that question. Regarding the comms plan, well, I guess because it will go live before the other site, I was like, why do we need to create a site to direct? But it will be live before our website is complete. So just don't want to confuse people about where to look for stuff. So along with that, and I know that if you're working with public information, then all of our avenues and channels will be available. So that's, you know, WCCTV, that's PSA is on with our local partners. That's a YouTube channel that perhaps could answer the FAQs that you all have considered, and then be activated with the ones that you've never thought about. You know, because people, when people have the opportunity to find things on their own, they will. So we just want to make sure that as we're adding all the information and possibilities, that we communicate that we have this whole new feature for you, this whole new tool for you, that, you know, we're putting it out in as many places as possible, you know, just killing our social. You know, it would be neat to have, you know, a TikTok of the mayor using the app.
We have a script for you, Councilmember Bearfield, already.
You heard what I said, TikTok for the mayor to use the mobile app with the dance. You know, so I think that's awesome. But I just want to echo my council members in saying that I think this is great. I think, you know, communication has been our bag for a long time, and cleaning up how we communicate, cleaning up how people can get information and report information is going to just elevate us to the next level. So I'm thankful that you're at the helm of this. I'm if we've got 3 to 4 months for the mobile app, so that puts us in the height of fall, will when would we see a progress report? Maybe 6 months? Post-launch?
I think, yes, ma'am. My goal is to keep you up to date as soon as we get started. I mean, that's my goal, to keep you up to date on progress on both of these initiatives. So I'll pull you along with us for both of these projects.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much.
I think council members have said it so well. This is a positive step towards ensuring that we're communicating strategically and an advancement to continue to be technologically advanced in every regard, and with that comes efficiency and better communication. So excited about where we're headed, and great questions and comments from council. Thank you. Great to see you. And I believe we have one more work session.
We've got one more.
Throughout that time.
All right, our last work session, Mayor and Council, is work session 374. It's a discussion of the municipal drainage utility fee, including proposed credits to be made to non-residential ratepayers. It's our final work session, as you mentioned, Mayor. It'll be led by Roger Glick, our Stormwater Division Manager and Floodplain Administrator. Roger also's first time in front of council, I believe, and relatively new employee. He's joined by Amy Burlarley Highland, our Director of Public Works, as well. Roger's presentation is a follow-up to a series of presentations and actions that occurred late in 2020 regarding the creation of a stormwater utility fee. And as the council and public may recall, the fee that we're going to discuss today is really a crucial path forward to provide for the repair and maintenance and improvement of the storm sewer system, which is valued at over $750 million, and in years past has really lacked a financial mechanism to ensure its improvement and maintenance. One of the council's requests in our past presentations, including in October 2020, was for staff to research and suggest drainage fee credits in addition to the exemptions we're already providing in the fee schedule. So Roger will be focusing on that in the second half of his presentation, and appreciate y'all's attention to it. Roger?
Mayor, council members, good afternoon. Thank you for the introduction. The purpose of today's presentation is to first recap the history of the drainage utilities creation, initial fee structure, and implementation efforts to date, and second, to recommend credits to be offered in the utility billing. The latter portion of today's presentation is a fulfillment of Resolution 2020-769, which established the municipal drainage utility fee. The resolution directed the city manager to propose for consideration by city council a schedule of drainage fee credits available to qualified non-single-family residential properties at least 60 days prior to consideration of the fiscal 21-22 budget. So, because several of you are new to council, we wanted to recap why we have a drainage utility. The city has a significant investment in drainage infrastructure, but unlike water and wastewater or solid waste, there's no dedicated revenue source for replacement of older or undersized systems. A significant portion of our systems are more than 100 years old and cannot carry today's runoff, or ongoing operations and maintenance. This resulted in a neglected system with collapsed lines, clogged inlets, creating localized flooding issues that were solved with emergency funding, while regular O&M had to compete with other needs, funding from the general fund. I want to show you just some examples of some of the crumbling infrastructure. This is some along Waco Creek, some collapsed inlets, clogged storm drains, and these lead to flooding issues around the city. The bottom two are actually from the storm of last week. And we had one more that we couldn't even fit on the slide of a floating bus. So there are some issues around the city that we need to address. I did want to point out that on today's agenda, you are addressing some of these issues on an emergency basis with a resolution that ratifies the $420 million for the expenditure with TTG Utilities for the storm sewer failure that created the sinkhole. In addition to the maintenance and O&M, there are also federal and state regulations and permit compliance costs that are continuing to increase. These are competing with funds with O&M from the limited funding in Public Works from the general fund. The Public Works Department has identified $124 million in priority CIP spending for major repairs and drainage improvements. These also had to compete with other priority CIP projects. Last November, the council took advantage of state law and created a municipal drainage utility system. This is Ordinance 2020-768, and adopted a drainage fee, which is Resolution 2020-769, which will create a dedicated fund to help address stormwater needs, including O&M, state and federal compliance requirements, system upgrades, and help fund CIP. State law requires that these funds be based on actual runoff generated and the impact on the drainage system. It is like the fees charged by other utilities for maintaining their system, like solid waste or water and wastewater. The more you use the system, the more you pay. It's not an impact fee on new development. It's more equitable than funding drainage through property taxes. This was the fee structure that was adopted last November. You created 3 tiers for residential structures, and the charge is based on what's called an equivalent residential unit, 2,633 square feet of impervious cover, which is based on the average or the median impervious cover on a residential unit in the city. This is broken into 3 tiers to be more equitable to smaller homes and larger homes. For non-residential properties, each property was based on the amount of impervious cover or an ERU. So we took the total impervious cover on the site divided by the 2,633 and came up with the number of ERUs and came up with a rate. The rate set in November was $5.41 to go into effect on October 1st. That rate was based on peer cities, and you can see we fall right in the middle of the peer cities that were used to create the fee. Reviewing the fee a little bit more to give you an idea of how this impacts businesses. A single residential fee broken into 3 tiers, as we mentioned, but the non-residential fees are based on the impervious cover on each site. A big box retail with almost 750,000 square feet of impervious cover would be 285 ERUs, or approximately $1,500 a month. A convenience store would be roughly 23 ERUs for $125 a month. And a fast food or a bank with a drive-in, approximately $81 a month. And a manufacturer, very large impervious cover of 1.2 million, would be approximately $2,500 a month. State law exempts certain properties. They exempt state and higher education properties, such as Baylor MCC. Council also exempted other properties, including city property, county property, property for independent school districts, and property that's owned by religious organizations. Those properties that are exempt by the City Council represent approximately $35,000 a month, or $420,000 a year. So what we've been doing since you created the drainage utility in November, because we were not collecting a fee until this October, Council authorized $440,000 on March 16th. We've used that to create the Watershed Protection Division within Public Works. This manages the stormwater in a stormwater utility and related work dealing with development, floodplain administration, and management of the city's municipal staff. We've created 3 new positions and transferred 3 positions from the engineering division in Public Works. We started implementing a billing system, updating the impervious cover for each site. The impervious cover that we had was that was used for the council presentation was good to explore the idea, but not good enough to actually charge people. We're updating the impervious cover data and exploring other ways to link to the city's billing system. In addition, we've continued our work. We've went through an audit with our floodplain protection program, with Texas Water Development Board, and have submitted our MS4 permit with TCEQ. The request in November was to propose for consideration by council a schedule of drainage fee credits available to qualified non-single-family residential properties prior to the consideration of the budget. The following are our findings. While we were considering what we wanted to do for credits, we took certain things into consideration. Credits should be consistent with what other peer cities are doing that were used to set the fee. We should exclude required drainage improvements or controls, like detention or water quality or flood mitigation, that were already required by code. We did want to include credits for activities or controls that were beyond the minimum, things that would retain water on site or help with volunteer cleanup. Some things that would promote the mission of the utility. Further in consideration, we've discovered that our peer cities do not offer drainage fee credits. In addition to the 8 cities that were used as our peer cities, there's a statewide survey done in 2010 of 66 drainage utilities, and they found that only 15% of the cities statewide offered credits of any sort, and several of those have since suspended their credit program. An administration could require additional staff depending on how complex our drainage credit system was. And credits would limit the revenue that was available for the drainage system operation and maintenance and capital improvements. Providing some credits to ratepayers would require either raising the fees on others or reducing the expected O&M and CIP benefits to make up the difference. As we look through this, we came up with a 4-tier drainage fee approach. One, looking at exempting parcels with small impervious cover. The second step, allowing people to receive a credit for volunteer efforts that would support the mission. And 3 and 4 are enhanced credits for installing on-site retention above code requirements. And 4 is installing engineered stormwater controls if your site did not already have them. For the waiver on sites with less than 500 square feet, we felt that this would be a good opportunity to take advantage of what was creating a problem as we were creating the billing structure. Many of these sites, the buildings are temporary. We're not sure if they're still there. They were there the day the photo was taken. They may not be there now. There's not water connected to them, so we don't have a billing address, and it may be not cost effective to actually build them. It may cost us more to send the bill than we would actually collect. This waiver was actually included in the presentation to council last October, but was not put into the ordinance and fee resolution at the time.
Hey, Roger, can I ask you a quick question on this one?
Sure.
The reasoning for the waiver is because sometimes it would be more expensive to collect than if we were just to not bill it at all, correct?
That's one part, and also we cannot be sure that the day we send the bill, the impervious cover is actually on site. If it's a temporary structure, they took this photo 2 years ago and it may be gone today.
Sure. Okay.
So,
thank you.
the second option is to add a 10% discount on the drainage fee for volunteer credits. There's pros to this, is it's beneficial to the city service, and it promotes a system of community because everybody's getting out there to do things that help the community. It's a low cost to the for administration, but the hours must be documented somehow. Possibly we can partner with Keep Waco Beautiful for this and be able to do this. The way this would work, the way we have it envisioned is for every ERU that a business has, if they provide an hour per ERU, they would receive a 10% discount for the year. So this,
the cap on that?
you can, the cap is 10%, but you can donate as many hours as you want. The more, the better. We would like to see, this is something we think would be good. The cost to administer could be fairly low, and it would help the city.
What's the minimum on that 10%? So 10% is the max amount I'm gonna get, but what's the timing?
Well, the way we envisioned this would be each business would donate, say you had a business that had 20 ERUs, if they donated 20 hours of service, that would give them the 10% discount for an entire year until their 20 hours had elapsed. So it wouldn't be 20 hours a month, it would be 20 hours for the year. That would balance out to roughly the same cost.
And folks could partner with any number of local entities that are involved with preservation or
Any number of local entities. What we would like to see is the volunteer hours would need to be something that drives the mission of the stormwater utility.
Okay.
Either cleaning up the creeks or lakes. One thing was if we had a household hazardous waste collection that would remove hazardous waste, if people wanted to volunteer for that. There are any number of things we could do. It's kind of out in the open right now.
Okay.
That's one of the things we're trying to hire someone to come in and create a public outreach portion in the division. So, the last idea that we came up with was using enhanced credits for retaining stormwater on site. This could be up to 25% credit. You would retain the stormwater on site and use it on site. And Waco has an extensive low-impact development guidance manual that we could take advantage of. Things like rainwater harvesting, rain gardens, or green roofs could fall into the initial credit. Further enhanced engineered credits would require someone to add detention or water quality controls where they were not in an area where they were not required. That credit would be more flexible. The Public Works Department would evaluate what they're putting in and determine what the impact to the system would be. For this, the controls would need to be constructed prior to the credit being granted. The functionality and maintenance of the control would need to be certified annually. The enhanced credits wouldn't convey to the next owner. If somebody creates a rain garden, we don't want the new owner to come in and say, why is there a wet spot in my yard, and dump a bunch of dirt in and fill it in and continue to receive the credit. And for the regular credits, enhanced credits, you'd receive, cap that at 25%. For the engineered credits, we would allow a greater credit depending on the impact of what they did. The financial cost of the entire system, the four-tiered approach, the cost to administer the full program, we would probably need another full-time employee, roughly $75,000. The estimated lost revenue would be $175,000. The 500 square foot exemption, like I said, that's fairly low cost, loss in revenue, roughly $10,000. The volunteer credit would be roughly $45,000 if 10% of the commercial parcels participated. The enhanced credit would be roughly $120,000 per year if 10% participated. The last two, the big cost driver on that would be, we would most definitely need the additional FTE. The first two, we could probably absorb the cost into what we already have planned. The total impact of doing the entire program would be $250,000. This would be in addition to the $43,000 roughly that we're already giving in exemptions. So our conclusions and recommendations. Waco already offers exemptions that other peer cities do not. As we're going through this, most of our peer cities do not offer the exemptions that Waco currently offers. So it would impact our savings and impact our revenue. Peer cities also do not offer drainage fee credits. The credits would put a bigger burden on those that are not receiving credits, and we would need to reduce our expectations of what we could do for O&M, maintenance, and CIP. The staff recommendation is to adopt the following additional credits for FY22. Implement the low impervious cover credit, because we think that would be could be a cost savings to the department, and implement the 10% discount for volunteer credits. We could reconsider kept my notes out of order. Reconsider the enhanced credits after the fee has been adopted. At this point, we don't know how much we're actually going to be collecting, and the first year we only have 11 months of revenue because of the way the fee is implemented. So we should reconsider whether we want those credits in future years. At this point, we're not recommending the enhanced credit. Thank you. And if you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer them.
Any questions?
I had more of a I love this idea of having the 10% discount for individuals to volunteer. That's exciting, especially organizations like Keep Waco Beautiful that are doing such great work. The enhanced, I hear all of the nuances of why we're considering pausing the enhanced credits, but I wonder if we're losing out on the opportunity to really encourage businesses to make really good choices that positively impact us. My recommendation would be for businesses to not be able to have that volunteer piece, but instead have that credit when they're doing something structural that will take better care of our stormwater and not really heavily affect our system. So.
This is something I agree with Councilmember Palmer on that, because it seems like on the credit side, where we're talking about impervious cover and we have a conscientious citizen who wants to remediate and take some action to reduce that impervious cover, that we should have some mechanism to get some kind of enhanced credit. I get it, maybe this first year we don't. I would like to leave that on the table to continue to study how that might work. I get the challenges around, you'd have to kind of staff up to figure out, you know, does it qualify, does it continue to qualify, you'd have to do inspections on what you pointed out, those challenges, but it still seems to me that there ought to be something that a property owner could do to say, hey, I get it, but I want to be a good, you know, green citizen or whatever, and I'm willing to tear down that shed that I don't use anyway, it's falling in, so I could help myself here by getting that credit. So I don't know, maybe part of it is this, do we measure this annually on what the impervious cover is, or just a one-time deal? Or
Our current plan is to review these as often as we can, using both data from the county and aerial flyovers. But one thing I would like to remind both Councilmember Palmer and Councilmember Holmes is our directive was only to offer the credits to non-single family residential customers. So if a homeowner tore down a shed, I think that would be great, but it wouldn't necessarily impact their fee.
yeah, I was thinking about a business though too. Is that a big barn that they weren't using, and think, oh, I could definitely cut my fee back if I used, you know, took that warehouse that's falling down anyway.
We do have an appeal process, so that if we come in and somebody says, I did tear down and change my impervious cover, then we would be able to document that and change their fee.
And then maybe to follow that whole thought of being able to advise on maybe new construction, what are the latest impervious cover, you know, mitigating structures that you can use to build a parking lot? Or is there some kind of porous parking lot? Yeah, I don't even know what that might be, but if we could advise people, and again, I know it's sort of a double-edged sword because we're trying to raise funds to keep this thing going, and if all we do is advise people on how to avoid paying this fee, we kind of self-defeating. But I think in the long run, it is more productive to do that because we'll have less need for the stormwater system itself if everybody's doing the right thing and doesn't just have a giant parking lot, a paved parking lot out there. Two other points I wanted to make. And I like what you said on the slide, that this way is more equitable than paying through property taxes. Because, I mean, what we have been paying through the general fund to try to keep this system going. So, in my mind, this should free up some liquidity in our general fund for whatever our other needs in the general fund could be, including property tax relief there. And also, these fees are reviewed annually, if I'm not mistaken. That this is this is kind of our first year that we're doing it. We're setting the structure, but for the and this is for the 21-22 budget. But for 22-23, we'll be looking at this again and just make sure there were no unintended consequences, or you know, that we can react, adjust these if we need to. If we find out at the end of the first year, hey, this didn't quite work the way we thought it would.
Councilman, we do anticipate reviewing this fee in alignment with other fees like our wastewater, or our water and wastewater fees, you know, the fee stack each year in the budget process.
Right. The initial fee resolution did set the fee for the next 5 years to allow us to do planning, but it can be reviewed at any time at the will and pleasure of the council.
Great. Thanks, Mr. Glick. Great presentation.
I did want to reply to one thing you said about talking to the developers at the front end to reduce their fee then. One of the other hats I'm wearing right now is that of the development engineer. So any new subdivision or commercial project that comes in, I review those plans, and I'm working closely with all of the developers and engineers in town to try to get them to reduce their impervious cover or come up with other ways to do this. I haven't talked to them in terms of this will reduce the drainage fee, but rather than it's the right thing to do.
Fantastic. The open communication is great. I appreciate it.
Any other questions or comments? I guess Councilmember Borderoot and Palmer and I myself weren't here when this was actually enacted. That was when I was on a break. But I want to commend staff for really trying to take a thoughtful, careful approach to something like this. I think it's very forward-thinking and future-minded. I think that a couple comments that I have is just, like as Councilmember Holmes referenced, I think it's important that we have the security of knowing this is here so that we can plan for future projects, but continue to monitor the impact on our businesses, our economy, and future taxpayers. I think that's a balancing act because we want to plan for the future by knowing this is here, but also we want to monitor it to ensure that there aren't unintended consequences. A question I have is, Bradley or staff, we sell our water to other cities, is that correct?
We do.
And
not stormwater, but. Right.
Okay, okay. Now, let me strike that question.
Okay.
One thought I had is I think it's going to be important as this rolls out for this council to partner with staff to go to business organizations, our chambers of commerce, business league, neighborhood associations, civic clubs to discuss why we're doing this. I think that there's going to be people that have questions about this when it lands on their bill. And I think it makes sense for us to, again, my hope is that staff and the council can partner together to go to our constituents to help them best understand why we have implemented this. I think Jim said it really well, and actually the presentation said it well when we said this is a really more fair way to fund infrastructure. And so it's with that in mind that we're doing this, and this does allow us to free this council up to spend money how we need to, and one component of that might be property tax relief. I liked what you said, Bradley, about reviewing other fees and just kind of really doing a in-depth comparison on really what we're charging our citizens. I think that that's going to be something that is important for us to continue to look at. So thanks for this presentation, and I look forward to moving forward with you guys on it. With that, I think that concludes our work sessions. Is that right, Bradley?
Yes, sir.
All right. Are there any requests for future agenda items?
Yes, I have a request for a future agenda item. In light of ERCOT making another announcement asking us to preserve energy in the heat of summer, would love for staff to look into either a future informal report or work session on what advocacy could look like with ERCOT and at the state level, so that way our residents are able to be cool in the summer and warm in the winter.
Okay. Thank you, council member. Any other requests? All right, we will now recess the work session and reconvene regular session for executive session as read into the record by the city secretary at 4:43 p.m.
Yes, Mayor and Council, notice is hereby given that the City Council will go into executive session in accordance with the following provisions. 1, attorney briefing, Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551.071, permit application for proposed landfill, Texas Commission on Environmental Quality Permit Number MSW-2400. 2, real property, Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551.072. 3, economic development, Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551.087. And 4, personnel, Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551.074, nomination and appointment of individuals to the McLennan County Appraisal District Board of Directors. We are now in executive session at 4:44 p.m.